All right, welcome to episode 22 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Jason Patterson of Aussie Arboreals. Pretty excited to talk to you. You're the first international guest on the podcast. So
Wow.
pretty I'm maybe I'm not that bright of a guy, but I don't know. I think it's pretty incredible that we're able to talk to each other as far away as we are with virtually no lag and in real time. It's pretty insane.
Definitely, man. Times have changed. When I got into snakes and stuff, I don't even recall internet, right? Like there weren't even forums. It was just trial and error all day long. And the world has become a smaller place, and the exchange of knowledge has changed so much of the way we do things, right? The way we can share our experiences and our mistakes and learn from each other has just totally changed the world. And for me these days, like, I'll be honest, I miss the days of the forums. I used to love jumping on the forums and chatting. And I find that social media these days a little bit more of a little less personal, because I don't know, the connections aren't there the way they used to be with the forums. Maybe it's just the way I used to like it, so I'm a bit biased. But I'm really enjoying the podcasts these days. I spend more time listening to podcasts because I can see the people who are talking and enjoying the live streams and chats and listening to people share knowledge and show things. And but you just never stop learning. But yeah, it's crazy that I'm learning more from people on the other side of the planet than I am from down the street. It's great.
Wild. It's really wild. So when did you get started in the hobby? What got you into it?
My earliest recollection of reptiles in captivity actually dates back to when I was a kid. Probably, can't remember how old I was, probably 5 or 6 or 7, something like that. My uncle had a couple of diamond pythons in a couple of enclosures outside. So he lives in Newcastle, which is about 30-40 minute drive north of Gosford, which everybody knows for diamonds. And I remember being a young kid going up there and seeing him feed his diamond pythons. And from then I was just like, I want a pet snake. The next kind of memory of him was as a younger kid, in primary school, probably about the age of 10, chasing, little eastern water dragons and stuff along the local riverbanks, catching them, keeping them as pets, and little eastern blue tongue lizards and things like that. In Australia, we need to keep licenses to keep reptiles. So the whole system here to keep a reptile is totally different than what it is over there. So we're all licensed keepers here, and there's paperwork for every type. Every time you buy an animal, you need to do paperwork. There's different categories of licenses for different animals. Every state and territory has its different licensing system. It's a far more complex system than what it is elsewhere in the world, I suppose. But
can you walk me through that process a little bit?
Yeah. So, we in Australia, we're only allowed native animals. We cannot keep anything that is not native to Australia, right? Anything non-native is illegal, completely illegal. If you're caught with something that is an exotic species, it will be confiscated. You will get a fine. It will probably be destroyed, as in euthanized or whatever. They'll destroy it. They'll kill it. So the native animals of Australia are a protected animal. They're protected species. We can't just walk down the street and capture an animal and keep it. That as well is illegal. So you must be buying from licensed reptile keepers. Now, the licensing system in Australia came in, I believe, somewhere in the mid-90s. And the way that works is each state and territory has their licensing system. there's typically a basic license category with, there's hundreds of animals on them. Mostly your basic stuff is most of your carpet species, your Enteresia, so your children's pythons, your spotted pythons, your Stimson's pythons, your black-headed pythons, your womas, things like that. Lots of lizards, blue tongues and beardies, and, your smaller goannas in some instances as well, a bunch of turtles and stuff. And, back in the day, anyone, I think when I got it, it could be 13 and you could get a license. So basically, my parents were like, well, when you're 13, you can get a license and you can get a pet snake. So that's what happened for me. When I was 13, I got my license and I could get a small snake. But,
is there any kind of testing, or do you just get the license? You just apply?
You just get the license. Like, look, if I'm to be honest, it's a bit of a money grab because you literally just go online, you fill out your details, and within 5 minutes, once you hand over your money, you get an email with your license number and you're good to go.
How much does that cost?
Good question. I think a basic license for the average keeper is probably, I'm going to say it's about $20 a year.
Okay.
And then if you want an advanced license, so an advanced keeper's license, the list of animals on that is a little bit shorter. They are for the animals that are considered a little bit more advanced to keep. The animals that most of us would agree that you need some degree of experience in keeping animals before you should be, dabbling in them. That would include green tree pythons. That still in New South Wales includes rough scale pythons. It also includes some of the larger monitors like your lace monitors, your parentis. So things that are, of course, way too big and aggressive and hard to handle for your young kids or those who are just complete novices. So, I know in the US, you could just go and buy a green tree python. You can't do that in Australia. You will have to have kept a python for at least 2 years before you can go and before you could even upgrade that license to the advanced license and get a green tree python. So I agree with that. I do think that's good. It kind of ensures people don't just jump in the deep end. They understand what they're doing before they do it. So, you got your basic, then you got your advanced, and even beyond that, you actually have another 3 categories for your venomous stuff. So you've got 3 more advanced licenses for the different elapid species and venomous species. So I've never gone down that path, but, obviously we've got a lot of venomous stuff over here as well, but your death adders, your taipans, your king browns and red bellies, there's a lot of different, some of them are more venomous than others. Some of them are more aggressive than others. So there are different categories for them as well. And to have the license to keep them, you must have, an up-to-date first aid certificate. Your snake room must have, for example, a lock and key just to go into your snake room. Each enclosure must have, again, a lock and key. The room must have a first aid kit. You must have on the back of the door an emergency plan in the case of a snake bite. There must be an evacuation plan and your nearest hospital, and all of these kind of things must be documented. So in the event that you get bitten, you've got a plan in place. So someone hopefully just doesn't find your body on the floor. But so all of this is rather tightly regulated. It definitely makes things a little bit more tricky. What is unfortunate is that it's a little bit behind the times sometimes. So because there's different states and territories, different regions have different animals. So for example, in New South Wales, where I am, we can't keep the Owen Pelly pythons yet, which is just outrageous. You can in other states, but we can't keep them here yet. Like, that's just crazy. You can in Queensland, can't keep them here. And I mentioned that because I love an Owen Pelly python, right? Who wouldn't want one of those things?
I was just going to say, is that one that's on your list?
Who wouldn't? Like, one of the rarest pythons in the world, right? I think for me, like, my connection to that, like, I've read the story of how I've watched a podcast with Gavin Bedford about how he, went about engaging with the Indigenous community, and and collected those founding animals, and the whole story behind that is just profound. I absolutely love it, and it's because of that rich story. I'm just like, oh God, I've got to have one of these animals, right? There's just such a deep story there, and I love that. But I can't get my hands on one because state government doesn't let me keep one. And it's not that we won't be able to keep them. It's just that they're so damn slow to do their updates with the book. Same thing can be said with Pilbara rock monitors. Can't keep them. Everyone else can. I can't keep a green tree monitor. It's just silly. Like, you know, so the licensing system is in place because they are native protected animals. You know, it's meant to be there so that, in theory, national parks and the different agencies can monitor and keep track of, you know, the amount of animals that are being kept and bred in captivity. There are rules and regulations. I'll give you an example. You know, obviously, we are only allowed to sell and buy animals with other licensed keepers. We are not allowed to go and capture wild caught animals. That is illegal. And for the most part, no one does that anymore. There's no need. There are literally countless captive animals anyway. Another rule is that you're not allowed to hybridize. But, you know, with all of the morphs in the industry these days, obviously the mixing of subspecies and stuff for all the designer market is obviously quite popular. But there's a lot of things that just make the whole licensing system a bit of a shambles. But I think the biggest notable thing that I think a lot of the international market doesn't realize is that we are limited to the native species of Australia. You know, so I know, you know, in the chondros, you know, scene, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, Australians are like 20 and 30 years behind compared to the US in terms of what they're doing. And it's like, well, that's because 10 and 20 years ago, people's collections were getting confiscated and euthanized by the agencies because they were non-native animals. Right. So where, you know, some of these guys who have invested decades of hard work to build these outstanding collections and stuff were losing animals. So it's sad.
So do you guys have the free handling of venomous species out there? It seems like you guys are overall more responsible with your keeping. Is that something that you see over there as well?
Oh, absolutely.
That's unfortunate.
I think there's idiots everywhere, right? Like I can't say that there's less here and more somewhere else. Like, I'm not to know, and I'm definitely not in that part of the community. I kind of stay a little bit low key, but I've been around for a pretty long time. Like, I've been keeping for over 25 years, but I've definitely seen my fair share of idiots doing some pretty crazy things, but I haven't, you know, like, I definitely see some more wacky stories coming out of the US, and maybe the responsibility thing does come down to the licensing. I don't know. Like, there's always there's an underground market for reptiles here. There's no denying it. Anyone who says it doesn't exist is lying. Like, you know, I've been offered my fair share of chameleons and Burmese pythons and retics and corn snakes.
Really?
They're all here. They're all here.
No
right?
way.
They're everywhere, right? It's like this underground community of people that just don't want licensing and don't care for all of this native stuff, and they just want a pet snake.
I didn't know. I had no idea that there was retics and berms and
crap, yeah. Oh mate,
wow.
Look, I don't know the quantities of these things, but you know, I've heard of people keeping rattlesnakes. You know, I've met people who breed chameleons. You know, like, these things are all here. Like, it's like anywhere and everywhere, right? There's always that shady side of it's not shady, it's just that underground, you know. There's a passion for animals. They love animals, right? Like, it's just the governments try to tie your hands a little bit. Like, I look, I'll be honest, I love all animals. I'm very lucky because I have a bias towards our natives. So I can definitely look at everything and appreciate everything, but I'm not unhappy that I'm restricted in what I can keep, because we have a ton of animals here and I can't keep even a fraction of the things that I want to keep that's Australian anyway. So I don't necessarily feel hard done by. I'm like, well, I couldn't keep it half of what I want. So
Yeah.
I'm lucky in that regards, but it's just the nature of it, right? You tell someone they can't have something, they're going to do it. They're going to have it, right? It's no
Absolutely.
different than in Florida, right? You guys can't keep certain larger species of things. You
Yeah.
can't tell me people are keeping them, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that there are, but I mean I don't know any people, but if they are, it's got to be nerve-wracking, because when they find out, they euthanize the animal and all that, and you get in serious trouble too. And
Yeah, for sure.
so
For sure.
yeah, it's similar. I can't have a retic or a berm, and kind of like you said, fortunately, I'm growing more and more fond of the Australian species. I love them. They're hardy. They're beautiful. Of course, excluding chondros. I really want to get into talking about them and just I don't have any yet. Cause I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid I'm going to kill them. The cages behind you, are there chondros in there?
Yeah, they're all greens. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is actually
those are,
my office.
oh, that's
I
awesome.
work from home, so I kind of just live next to them all day, which is really cool. And I think that's what stole my heart with the greens. So going back, like my first snake, as I said, when I was 13, I got a spotted python. I got a couple here. I got a bunch to pull out for you.
Thank
So.
you for going back. I totally derailed you with the
No, that's
legality
all right.
and
That's all
all
right.
that.
I pulled out a few things. Probably gonna get tagged. I haven't fed some things for a while. So this guy is just a little spotted python, right?
Oh, beautiful.
I love my locality stuff. Like, so
Yeah.
this is another thing that's interesting, right? In the Australian hobby here, for a very long time, I would say that the largest part of the Australian hobby was extremely hardcore focused on not just pure species and subspecies, but locality specific.
Mhm.
That's because we could be, and we had it. We had it all, right? We had everything, right? It was
Yeah.
quite literally just down the street there, somebody, right? So, like, this is, you've probably heard of Cape York spotted pythons, or
Yeah.
you've heard of a blonde spotted python, right? This is the OG. This is literally the original. And by that, this is a Cooktown locality blonde spotted python. This specific line was collected back in the 80s, way before licensing systems. And this is from a very well-known and regarded breeder called Bob Withy. He has been he's kind of recently retired from the hobby. He'd been in the hobby since, I guess, the 60s. He collected these animals himself from a barn in the 80s from a mate's place. He drove up from, he lived in the Sydney area, I guess you could say, drove up to Queensland. Back then, we're talking like a 3-day drive to get up there, collected some founding animals, and his line is, he coined the term blonde, right? So now you hear the term used a little bit more loosely. These are the ones that have recently been kind of subspecies to the Maculosa peninsularia, I think they call them, something like that.
Mhm.
But this was actually, his line was actually my first snake when I was 13.
Wow.
And now I didn't buy that directly from him, but recently I got the opportunity to buy a pair from what will be his last clutch, because he's, like I said, he's kind of retiring from it. So I didn't pass down that opportunity. Like, they're not, I'm not going to lie, they're not like the most screaming hot form, but I'm like, you know what? This is a line that's been in captivity for over 45 years from, like I said, this is the original line of blonde spotted python in captivity. And they are an absolute, like, passion of mine. I love those things, right? So for me, that's where snakes started, right?
Yeah.
With spotted pythons. And then, I got more. I got Stimson's pythons, and Yeah, I've my issue was that I couldn't pick a favorite. I couldn't focus. I just chopped and changed and had bits and pieces of everything. And I remember when the albino carpet, well, I had jungle carpet pythons and oh god, I had gelatins from like the original line of them that came out. Had multiple lines of jungle, the black and yellow jungles as well that came out. And again, in Australia, we were spoiled, right? Like the Tully jungles, Palmerston jungles, Cowley Beach jungles, gelatins, there's like Athertons, there's so many localities, despite the small geographical distribution of that, group of carpets.
Yeah.
We had so many options, and people were working on specific localities, and then even different polymorphic traits within that. Some were like, I'm working with Palmerstons and I want striped snakes, and some are like, I'm working with them and I'm going for reduced pattern, and some are like, I'm going for banded, right? So but same with carpets, right? Coastals, bread light, again, so many different options, so many locality specific things. Woma python, same thing, right? You could, you see people, Western Australian womas. Well, I used to keep woma pythons when they were worth a fortune, and they used to be on advanced licenses as well.
How much?
And
Give me an idea of the pricing. Like what does a spotted python cost right now? What does a woma cost?
oh, like that guy there is worth like, I think they're like $200.
Okay.
So they're like, and even that, like some of them go for like $150.
Yeah.
But like there's obviously some mutations. So the Enthresia are becoming, so Enthresia are the genus for your children's pythons, Stimson's pythons, spotted pythons, and pygmies as well. But, they're not kind of as popular. But your children's spotteds and Stimsons are very popular here. And that's because they're giving us a lot of pretty cool looking patterns and mutations, right?
Yeah.
A lot of nice paint jobs and stuff on them. There'd be close to 10 mutations, and I think these days. But again, with the designer market, a lot of mixing and matching happening. We've got albinos, we've got T positive albinos. There's marble pattern as well. I don't even know how to explain that. I guess it's kind of like a cow retic, I think, if that's the right one. The white ones that go all speckly looking and stuff.
Yeah.
Just a weird looking pattern, but there's so much variety in those guys. There's the granites, but you start mixing and matching them. There's a few new ones as well that have come out. So that there, actually, bear me. So that's a blonde, but then you've got. I'm just here off camera, but bear with me. Grab these guys out.
I actually have the I have striped spotted pythons from Brian Young. Well, python right now. I'm waiting for him to get the this year's clutch more ready to go.
Oh, right, nice. So it's just a standard. Sorry, it's an albino. So the light's not really doing us any favor, but that's just a standard albino spotted python.
Wow.
All right. So,
Beautiful.
when you start getting the albinos and you start getting the stripes, you can obviously work towards striped albinos and stuff. And, that's not quite an adult, but, you'd call that a sub-adult for sure. Like if that was a male, that's breeding size. So these are very popular pet snakes here, right? Like that there is great. You could have a 5-year-old kid buy him a pet snake. This thing is relaxed. It's chilled. And that's an adult size practically, right?
So they're they're like the ball python of Australia.
A little bit, yeah. Like it's definitely like we've got two major markets here. One will be your carpets, the other will be your Enthresia, basically. So these guys here, you got people. There's a lot of mixing going on. I'm a purist at heart, I'll be honest. So like I can definitely look at all these cool patterns that people are making and love them and appreciate them for what they are, but I just kind of cringe at the amount of, well, to be honest, they're just all the mongrels that get created to produce that pretty one, right? Like you put two recessive mutations together and you're going to get your double hets, and you put your double hets together and you got your 1 in 16 type chance to hit your double recessive, and then it's like that's 15 mongrel looking snakes just to produce your 1 in 16 odds type thing. So I look at that and I'm like, oh, the gene pool is just getting mixed. And, I remember going back like 10, 15 years, all the purists, which was probably 95% of the keepers, were like, oh my God, this is going to be devastating for the hobby, right? All of the crossbreeds. And it's not so much the pretty ones that come out that everyone was worried about. Everyone's like, what about all of the mixed siblings that are coming out? What are they going to do? Oh, no, it's okay. Everyone's going to sell them for what they are. No one doubted that. We all were like, well, of course you will. Like, there's no one necessarily doubts the integrity of the breeder, right? In my honest opinion, right? The breeders here are I think the integrity of the Aussie market and the keepers here is good. It's a small market. You do wrong by people, you kind of ruin your reputation pretty quickly. But what you end up with is that you've got a younger market, or the buyer, the consumer, you could say, will often they get sick of keeping. They're new to the market. They buy something, they sell it a few years later, and they don't know what they're selling. I often see things up for sale, pair of snakes for sale, and you have a look at it, and you're like, well, not to sound arrogant, but I've been keeping long enough that I should be able to identify anyone should be able to identify a bredli from an inland carpet, for example, right? Sure. But when you're looking online and you have a look at it and you're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Right? If I don't know and they don't know and they're trying to label it as something, that's where it's like, okay, nobody knows what's out there anymore. Like, too many things are just becoming mixed, because for every one really cool designer, it's kind of like how many hundreds of just, I call them Morelia milkshakes. This is Morelia milkshakes. God knows what's out there anymore. So I just stay away from most of it. I'm like, I don't even know what half of these guys are keeping.
Yeah.
There's too much. So in the pursuit of designer, animals, I don't like the consequences of all of the mutts.
Yeah.
That's just my personal thing, and I just try to stick with the pure stuff.
So do you have like a set handful of breeders that you go through that you trust and what they're putting out is exactly what you're going to get?
So like I said, I don't really buy much, to be honest. I don't have time. Like a lot of it, I work full time. I say I'll keep my collection small. It grew bigger than what I wanted it to. So I went through a phase where my collection years ago was quite big, and then it went really small, and then it went big again, and then it went small, and it's up, down, up, down. I love animals, right? I have a passion, and I shift from one thing to another, and I'm very terrible at focusing like that. I'm definitely more focused these days, and I think I've jumped onto the narrative that less is more. And my focuses now aren't necessarily just breeding. I have other projects that aren't necessarily reproductively focused. So, I'm sure we'll touch on it. I have diamond pythons. My diamond python project is not about breeding diamond pythons. My diamond python project is to set up a nice, natural, outdoor, large enclosure for diamond pythons and keep them outdoors. Nice. That's my project goal, right? So I've tried to stop buying pairs of snakes. Not everything needs to be a pair of snakes. Now, I say that, I guess, hypocritically, because I do have male and female of everything I keep. But that was not the intention. And I look at the diamonds. I have a trio of diamonds, right? Actually, I got one here somewhere. I got a couple here. Let me pull some out while I talk about them.
So how many animals do you have altogether? Like right now?
I think I got about 30, just shy of 30.
Okay, and that's a small collection to you, or?
No, that's not. I actually think that's too many for me personally. I definitely think by a lot of people's standards that could be considered small. I actually think it's a lot.
Yeah.
Another thing that over time, years and years ago, I used to keep a lot of tubs. I'd say most of my collection used to be in tubs. Most of my collection now is not. Actually, adults are not in tubs. I prefer like what you see behind me. I wouldn't say I go for huge enclosures, but I do try to give them bigger enclosures. I understand snakes don't necessarily visually care what the enclosure looks like, if that makes sense, but I do think they appreciate room to move and things to crawl over. I know that when I give them perches and move things around, that it definitely makes them more active, and I can only assume that activity equates to some type of, stimulus, and it creates, in the greens, for example, additional defecations and muscle tone and things like that. And well, to me, that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
So he's one of the little diamonds, for example.
Ah.
So
Oh my
this is
God.
her
Can you
name's
just,
Saffron.
I mean, for anybody that's listening on Spotify or anything like that, can you describe the pattern? I mean, it's insane how beautiful
So,
that snake is.
so for me, I love what I refer to these as like a classic diamond, right? And I'll pull out an adult after, but for me, I love, and actually, she's not as good as I like them, but she's got characteristics that I really do like. So for me, paired rosettes down the back, small rosettes. I'm going to criticize her as I say these things. Her rosettes are too big for my liking. Small rosettes of like 5-6 scales paired. So you know how you got the black that goes around those rosettes down the back? So there's a little bit of black around those that kind of highlights them. Ideally, the black doesn't touch, so those the rosettes look totally separate from each other.
Yeah. God dang, she is beautiful.
But she's a pick of a clutch. So I didn't breed her, obviously. I've never bred diamonds, I'll be honest. I've got mates who have. Like I said, breeding them for me is not really a thing. I can't not have them. I've had them pretty much always, but I can't not have them. Like I said, one of my first captive experience with reptiles was my uncle's diamonds, right? So there's this nostalgic pull to want to keep them outside because, like, I was literally 6 and that was what drew me to reptiles, right?
Yeah.
So I got her. Her name's Saffron. She's very yellow. It's a bit hard to capture here because I got a light right above me. But
yeah, I can see it.
Beautiful.
I mean, yeah, she's just insanely beautiful.
And she's only young, right? Like she's going to pop like another year or so. I reckon she's going to be really, really nice. She was quite a standout in her clutch. So she's what? I don't know. She's probably about 2 foot long.
Yeah.
She's got reasonably good paired rosettes all the way down. Like I said, she was the most, the lightest hatchling. Like, as you'd know, look, I'll be honest, I think hatchling diamonds are probably one of the ugliest carpets that hatch. Like, they're quite dark, right? They're very brown. And they kind of go through their own, I don't know if you'd call it an ontogenic color change, but they definitely go through their own kind of color change. They definitely don't look like their adult self. So you really do have to hold them back to see how they're gonna turn out. But they're not the prettiest little hatchie compared to their adult selves. But there's definitely something about these guys. These guys actually remind me of like the Australian Indigenous, paintings, like where there's like lots of dots and stuff. If you look up Australian Indigenous artwork, you might get a feel for what I mean. But definitely a cool species. And like I said, for me, the purpose of my project with diamonds is not about breeding them.
Yeah.
Right. There's other reasons to keep snakes. It's not just about reproduction. It's not just about pumping out babies and, I produced more than that guy this year. Big deal. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's I to be honest, like I was up till like 1 o'clock this morning looking at how am I going to build this outdoor setup for these guys, because it's something I'm so keen on. I wanted to actually start now. So we're coming into, it's spring here now, right? So the weather's warming up. I would love to have gotten the big girl outside. I'll get her out now. I'd love to have gotten her outside. She's in an enclosure here. It's a bit smaller than what she needs to go outside. She's due for her upgrade enclosure. But I had every intention of having her outside this summer. But we're looking at renovating the house. So if we're going to have a bit of construction outside, it's probably not the right time.
Yeah.
Might get a bit dusty, might get a bit noisy, or not that the noise will bother her so much, but gonna have builders and stuff floating around the property, so might not be ideal.
So and so we're in October right now, so that's spring for you guys. So it's what's your winter like where you're at?
So I'm in Sydney, so it's home for diamonds, right? Like we can see diamonds. I've seen diamonds in the wild here probably Closest I've seen diamonds to home's probably about 15 minutes drive from here, 20 minutes drive, Colo River. I've seen a couple up there, which is pretty cool. I haven't seen many. We haven't really touched on. We'll probably touch on that. I haven't done a lot of field herping recently. It's hard with kids, but they're around. There's some areas that are a bit more prolific to find them. But like in winter, it'll drop down to obviously Celsius. Sorry, I'm not good at converting here, but like 3 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius. So like everybody knows, right? Diamonds in winter, cold is not going to bother them. They want cold. In summer, hot is not going to bother them during the day as well, right? So night times in summer, even if it's a 40 degrees Celsius day, which I don't know what that is.
I wish I would have got my calculator ready.
I'll have a look right now, right? Because I'm assuming a lot of guys in America are going to be like, "What the hell does that even mean?"
That's what I'm thinking right now. I'm like 3 degrees. That's pretty close to freezing.
What do we got? So in summer we can have days here 100 to 105 Fahrenheit, right?
Okay.
You can have a week of that, right? I wouldn't say it's probably mid 90s is about right for summer, but you get that during the day. But at night time, it's still probably dropping down to around about the mid 70s.
Okay.
So that's pretty standard diamond territory for summer, right? You might get 95 to 100 during the day, but it's still giving them that 75 at night.
Yeah.
Right. So that's your relief. They might have that hot day basking, but again, keep in mind that that's stinking hot, and they're probably finding some shade for most of that stinking hot part of the day, and they might just stick themselves out in the sun at 10 a.m. when it's only 90 or 85. Get a bit of a bask, go back into the shade. Maybe late afternoon they come out back into the sun a little bit, get a little bit more sun, and then go back into the shade. But in winter, different story, right? Like we've got. So again, I'll go back to my trusty Google.
I appreciate it.
What do we got here? Like I'll set 2 degrees Celsius, for example. So we're talking mid 30s, 35 to 40 Fahrenheit at night would be a normal night in winter here.
So you're literally describing like Florida weather, basically.
Yeah, mate, stick them outside.
Yeah, I'm so excited right now. I'm just thinking about getting diamonds. I was just talking to Nick Mutton today about the enclosures. I got a guy nearby that builds enclosures, and they're so affordable. I could keep a trio in an outdoor enclosure, and that outdoor enclosure would cost what one 4x2x2 would cost indoors.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to provide any heating. Nothing. Just
no electric.
If that's your temperature range, they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
The only difference is our nights are definitely hotter. It's usually in the 80s at night.
How much?
Probably in the 80. Okay, so it's 80 Fahrenheit usually during the summer.
So what's that, like 20s? But what about winter?
Winter, we'll get down into the low 40s, and on occasion we'll dip into the 30s.
Sounds perfect to me.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So when I say that, when we talk about diamonds up in Gosford, right? So I'm in Sydney Basin, right? So geographically, Sydney sits a little bit lower than the surrounding mountains, right? Mm-hmm. And when we talk about mountains in Australia, they're not mountains, they're tiny. When we're a flat country. So let's be clear on that. They're not that tall. But when I say Colo River, right, which is where I've seen diamonds here, that's Richmond. If anyone looks on a map, we're talking the northwest corner of Sydney Basin. That absolutely gets below freezing at night. Absolutely. All right. There's absolutely frost on your windows. The grass is crunchy of a morning, -1 degree, -2 degrees. So what's that? Probably 30, 28 Fahrenheit or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Just below freezing point. It would be like that many nights during winter. And that's wild. That is a known locality of diamond pythons, right? You've got Illawarra, which is, again, that's we're talking, 80 miles south of Sydney, right? Again, they're notorious. There's a lot of diamonds down there. It's getting colder down there. It's on the coast even, so it's colder again at night. But then you got Gosford and Newcastle, and then all the way up to the Port Macquarie, which is where you start to get those natural intergrades, which Nick was talking about, a couple of months ago, or weeks ago, in his meeting with you. And like up around was it Nabiac, I think it is, which is about 50 miles south of that kind of overlap region where you still got your diamonds. It's a lot warmer there, right?
Mhm.
Like, you're probably going to be getting temperatures close to those at winter and stuff, but still we're talking a few hundred miles north of where we are right here, right? So when I'm saying we've got diamond populations that are okay at, freezing point at night, of course they're in logs and they're, finding their little warm spot for those night times, but they're still getting pretty bloody cold ambient temps, and they're still getting stinking hot day temps, and they're finding their little spot. There are populations. This population range is spread over, again, I'm converting numbers I don't understand very well, but, a good 500 miles or something of, I don't know, the geographical range, but there's a good temperature gradient there as well.
Wow.
So it sounds to me like the temperature ranges there are fine. And that's what they do well with. Like, again, I've not bred these guys, right? But, sometimes I hear the information from keepers in the US, and then I hear a lot of, stuff from keepers here in Australia. And it's like there's a little bit of a mismatch of like, I hear guys in the US, diamonds are super hard to keep and breed. And then I hear people in Australia, diamonds are super easy to keep and breed. And it's like, well, that's a big difference of opinion. What's the difference? The way they're kept. In Australia, so many guys are like, just whack them outside, they'll be fine. Right?
Yeah.
And then they have breaks. I know a guy in Sydney who, and we're talking Richmond, again, the guy's located in Richmond. In fact, I'll get this diamond out right here. I brought this one in purely to bring her out. She's probably going to be a bit huffy. This, to me, is what I consider, again, biased maybe, is a perfect diamond in my eyes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That to me, like those rosettes. See how those rosettes aren't touching? The black doesn't touch.
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, everything's reversed on the camera, right?
That is gorgeous.
Her name's Doris.
Beautiful Doris.
Doris and Saffron will one day be roomies. And Doris should have been outside as we speak.
Now, about how big is she?
She's probably about, I want to say 6.5 feet, maybe 7, probably 6.5 feet.
And all the rosettes are just, none of them are touching.
She's head to toe like that.
Yeah,
she's head to toe. Like, I kind of consider her, like, she's flawless in my eyes. Like, I absolutely adore this snake. Like, she is so perfect looking in my eyes. Like, again, when I say perfect looking, I'm talking like, if I was to find this in the wild, I'd be like, holy shit. Like, that is just exceptional. Right?
It's almost criminal for you to not breed her.
yeah, I understand that too. Right? But see, it's just like, see those rosettes, how those they're just not touching.
Oh my God.
Just everything's spaced. See the diamonds there are like 4 to 5 scales. Even down the side, there's no barring. It's all just nice dots. I
gotta locate some diamond pythons now. You've wrecked my credit score. I gotta rack up some credit now.
Nah, these are awesome animals, man. These are awesome. And
now,
like
what do they go for? Like, what does the diamond sell for in Australia?
Like you get a screaming hot young diamond between like. In fact, I've seen their prices go up, which I think is a good thing because I think they're an exceptional animal. But I would say that a quality diamond these days, you should expect to pay $400 to $700.
Wow.
I'm not going to say you can't get them cheaper. I've definitely seen them cheaper, and I've definitely seen them a bit more expensive. But I think that's a reasonable price for the average diamond.
Yeah.
Right. It depends what you're willing to pay. Obviously, I'll just pop her back. But like little Saffron there, I paid I think I paid $700 for her.
Wow.
And, you know, in my eyes, she was worth it. Now, because they're young, you're not 100% sure how outstanding they're going to be. You're obviously hoping they're going to be something special. I think she'll turn out pretty bloody exceptional, to be honest.
Yeah.
Her yellow, I'm hoping Saffron, the little one, I'm hoping her yellow will be better than that one, to be honest. But the pattern on that one I just had out is just, in my eyes, like perfect. And that's what I refer to as like classic, like that classic diamond look, right? It's got those nice paired rosettes down the back, you know, because the further north you get, you know, especially when you start getting into that intergrade territory, you know, the diamonds start to take on that more coastal traits in terms of the patterning. The rosettes start to form bands, right? Rather than two individually and spaced rosettes, you get a band or a joined, you know, thing. And then you start to get more like a lateral, the stripe down the side from the neck down a little bit, for example. So not that there's anything wrong with that, and there's plenty of diamonds with that. I've seen diamonds here in Western Sydney striped near head to tail.
Wow.
Pure diamonds, right? It's not that they don't exist. They absolutely exist. Pure striped diamonds. You guys have reduced pattern diamonds over there that are striped even, right? And the stardusts and all those things, right? They're all great looking animals. My preference is just that, right?
Yeah.
That's a classic looking diamond. And I think that you can't, in my eyes, you can't beat it. That's just what they're meant to look like.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. So that's my jam.
Yeah.
The diamond. So like I
Yeah.
said, for me, that project is not about breeding them. So I have a male. I do have a male as well. And he's a good looking male. Pattern wise, probably similar to the little one. He's not, if I'm going to breed him, he's not good enough. Sounds a bit picky, but like, if I have to be honest, if I'm going to be breeding the diamonds one day, he's probably not good enough. But because of how good that one is that I just had out, probably want to get a male. I definitely want to get a male from the guy I got that diamond off that female, and I've been chasing him for a while for it. And he's got a couple up his sleeve that he's holding on to, of which he says I can have one in time, but he says I don't need to move one on right now, so why should he? And I'm like, fair enough. But
so what size enclosure are you thinking for outdoors, for keeping them outside? Like what do you think?
It's a good question. Like last night I was literally looking at this, right? Do I build it? Do I get one built? Do I get it made out of timber? Do I get it made out of, like, you know, metal or steel? There's a lot going through my head, because the properties, the heating, or the properties of each of them offer benefits and disadvantages. I actually like the idea of going with the timber one. It's going to be a lot easier to screw logs and branches and even planks of wood and stuff like that for like a shelf in there. So I'm kind of leaning towards that. And where I'm looking at the moment is a lot of actually pre-made chicken coops and chicken runs, cat runs even, right? So one of the ones I was looking at yesterday is I'll convert the feet, because you guys use silly measuring metrics, which make no sense to anyone else on earth. What was it? It's probably it'd be just shy of 6. It was about 6 feet deep. Right, 6 feet. So 6 feet by 6 feet, and I want to say 10 feet long.
Okay.
And I don't think I'd be comfortable going any smaller than that.
Okay.
Because again, it comes not to say that smaller wouldn't be okay, right? People are keeping these inside in 2x2x4, right? Problem with 2x2x4, in my opinion, is that it's going to be hard, especially. So here's a couple of personal opinions. A 2x2x4 for a diamond is, in my opinion, a bit small, but the thermal properties of the material you use is going to make it a little bit challenging to get your temperature drop at night. You're going to want to give that thing a heck of a lot of ventilation, right? So, you know, if you're using melamine or like a timber material or even PVC with a glass fronted enclosure, you can turn all the heat off at night, But if you've had that sitting at 30 something degrees during the day, it's probably only going to get down to, 15 at night, for example. It's not going to drop down. In fact, it's just never going to drop down as cold as you want, because the room's probably never going to get cold enough, right? Yeah. But even still, you're going to want a lot of ventilation on there so that you can drop it. But so that's just my 2 cents on that. Bigger is going to be better. It's going to allow you to give a genuine hot spot and a genuine cold spot. And I think that's really important for the diamonds. They love it, right? They love it. I think they behave, bad analogy, probably more like a bearded dragon than any of the other carpets, right? They're going to bask and they're going to move away from the basking spot. They love that crap, right? But when I stick it outside, again, it comes down to me. It comes down to the project is not reproduction. Sure, I could go smaller, right? I know guys keeping them outside in 2 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot.
Yeah.
It's working for them. They're breeding them very successfully. Not a problem. That's just not my end goal, right? My goal is to actually have a timber bench that I can go in and sit on, like a park bench. I want to have a little pond. I want to have some natural shrubs, and I want to have an actual natural little tree and a lot of, branches and, what in there. And I want to actually just go and sit in there, so I can feel like I'm in their habitat. There's enough bush close enough to me that I can go get the natural shrubs and stuff that I want and the branches and stuff. And I just want to set it up like a slice of their natural habitat. That's the project that I've got in mind.
That's so cool.
And I think it's important that the keeping community starts to consider those projects as just as rewarding and just as fulfilling and just as important as those as how many babies can you produce.
Yeah.
Because if your mindset is, I want to produce 100 clutches this year, and it's like, cool, in order to do that, you start compromising husbandry. And, and by that, I mean, you start having to go, okay, in order to have 100 clutches, I need 1,000 tubs. In order to have 1,000 hatchie tubs, well, I need to halve the size of the hatchie tubs, right? And therefore you start compromising on thermal gradients or the quality of the tubs or the regular maintenance periods, and all those things start to get compromised in some way, because your goal is, production numbers, rather than some other kicks that you get. And personally speaking, I've lost interest in tubs because I can't see my animals. So if I can't see it, I lose interest in that species, is something I've noticed, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I can see it and I can interact with it and I can appreciate it visually, I become obsessed with it even more, right? And I want to work with it more, and I want to improve it more. Like all the greens behind me, I've got 9 here. They're all Australian. Again, very lucky, and people, I'm lucky that I have a preference for the Australians, right? It's convenient, in fact. But everything I keep them in here is 2 by 2 by 3 foot enclosures. Everything is in 2 by 2 by 3. I personally consider that to be the bare minimum size enclosure for a green tree python. And I know there's many guys overseas who are keeping them in 2 by 2 by 2s and smaller. Oh, but it's a male. Why will I want to keep it in smaller than that? I see people keep them in 2 by 18 by 18 inches, right? Or 2 foot by 1.5 by 1.5. Oh, it's a male, so they stay small, so that's okay. And I'm like, oh, it reproduces, therefore it's okay. And it's like, okay, but my argument is this. I'm like, you could keep me in a 6 by 6 by 6 foot prison cell my whole life. You put a good looking Sheila in the prison cell and you're still going to want to reproduce, right? Like it doesn't take away that biological instinct to do that thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just think that, there's other parts of the hobby that we sometimes get caught up in. Is that drive to want to make more of them and keep more of them. And that's why I say, or feel personally, less is more sometimes. I'm having more enjoyment keeping less animals, right? And I'm having more fun keeping them in enclosures that I at least enjoy. I'd love to do, natural enclosures. Can't do it. I don't have time. But you can see I keep quite a lot of foliage in these. It's all fake, Everything
Yeah.
in there's fake. It's all plastic. Right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easy to clean. It's easy to maintain, but it looks good. Provides a lot of coverage. It's a balance of all things. But
Do you have plans to breed your greens?
yeah. So can we say that girl's on eggs right now?
Oh wow.
So this season I paired one boy. You can't see, but it's 3x3 here, so there's more below. So the boy went with two girls. One girl was just not receptive. She had no interest whatsoever. She was literally just running away from him every night. So I stopped that one. There's no point letting him chase her. He was chasing her, like he wanted to do it, and she just literally was not interested. I tried them a few times. I probably put him in. So I was kind of alternating him between the two girls, to try to get the two, but it was going nowhere. But the female on the top, they were locking a lot. And they did the deed, and she ovulated, and all's looking good. I'll be honest, it's my first season with greens.
Oh wow.
I've never done greens before, so with greens, you're probably aware it takes time. I tried to do the right thing and start with young animals, and it takes time to grow them up, and it's a patience game. Some of these other species, you can get them up to size in 2.5 years and whatnot, but they take a while. So it's been a long time dream. So I know we're kind of all over the place, but I actually got my first greens in like 2011. In 2011, I got my first greens, but I didn't keep them for very long. I kept them for a few years, and then I moved out of home and bought my own house. Right. And at that time I had to make some pretty tough decisions and regrettable ones, because I used to also breed lace monitors, right?
Oh
So
wow.
Bell's face lace monitors. So I sold my lace monitors, I sold the greens, I used all my money, I bought a house. Probably a wise decision, but I still miss those animals.
Yeah.
And then obviously sometime later I got back into greens, and then I got the wall behind me here. So there's a whole bunch of ages here. I've got some that are a couple of years old. I've got some that are coming up to 4 years old, so they'll be tried next year. So I think it's these four here. So it's 2 males and 2 females. So those 4 will have a crack next year because they're all up to size. They'll have a go next year. They'll also have a go.
How old are they about?
They'll be 4 this year, I believe. I'd have to check
Okay.
my records. I'm pretty terrible at remembering off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure they're coming up to 4. They're definitely of size, though. I'll try and grab one out after, but they're 4, and they will be 5 and 6, I think it is.
And you're doing maternal incubation?
Yeah, first time doing that too. Oh my God, just have a crack. Why not? First time breeding them, so first time trying that as well. So
I love how you're very laid back the way that you're keeping. You're not worried. It doesn't seem like you're like overly worried about producing an animal. You're more just doing it for the experience of it and the love of it, it seems.
I think deep down I'm probably freaking out. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'll be pretty cut if nothing comes out of those eggs. But I've just always found the more I fuss, the more I screw up. So I've made some dumb mistakes. Like I've pipped eggs too early and lost entire clutches. I've just made errors over years. And one thing I've always found is true: don't stress too much. Like you will, right? You'll panic and you'll worry, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Like I feel like she's been on those eggs for like 6 months, right? Like it feels like an eternity. I keep looking at the date and I'm like, oh crap, she's only been on them for like 4 weeks. Right? It's like she's still got nearly a month to go. And it's just like, hurry up already. Right. But things are a bit chaotic here. I'll be honest, I don't even have hatchie rack completely ready for them ones. Right. So it's just everywhere at the moment. I've got the incubator running. I've got 2 other clutches due from some spotted pythons. I'll probably maternally incubate them. And I don't know why I'm doing that, to be honest. I don't know why. I've wanted to do it. I could have just incubated some freaking I could have just let some spotted pythons do it, to be honest. But I just thought, you know what, that would be more memorable.
Yeah.
Right. For me, there's been some milestones keeping and some heartbreaks as well. So I'll give you some heartbreaks. So one of my first and most memorable clutches was my first clutch of Woma pythons. So Woma pythons in Australia now are worth like $200, right? You can't give them away, which I don't know why. They're amazing. And when I was 18 and I finally got my advanced keeper's license, I bought Womas because back in the day they were on an advanced license, and that makes no sense because they just shouldn't be, but they are, or they were. And they were like $4,000 a pair. I think I paid $4,000 or $5,000 a pair. They were very expensive. And I bought two pairs, two different localities. I had Rockhampton's Downs, which is a Northern Territory locality, and I bought a Budari locality, which is a very small Western Australian locality. Quite both very nice looking animals, and both quite distinct in their look. And I had great breeding success with them. Actually, I've bred many Womas, and yeah, my very, very first clutch, I don't know why, I just got paranoid. I cut the eggs on day like 51 or whatever I should have done. It right, it was textbook. I did everything that the book said, everything that everybody told me to do. Cut the eggs, and anyway, the babies are all fully formed and everything, but they all died. The whole clutch. I was devastated. Devastated. It was the only clutch I had that year too. So
how many eggs?
It's probably about 5 or 6. They only have small clutches, so you get like 4 to 8 eggs out of them. You know, sometimes a bit more or less, but it was probably 5 or 6 eggs. I can't remember exactly, but you know, I was devastated because again, we're talking when they were a couple of $1,000 each.
Yeah.
And man, I was like 19, so there's big dollars, right? When you're young and you're still studying, and they're big dollars. It matters because I wanted to waste it on more snakes probably. So I probably already spent the money in my head. So, you know, it was a bit of a kick in the guts. Then a few years later, the first albino carpets, when they came out, right, they were expensive as well, right? So I paid a good mate of mine, and I went halves on a pair of them and a het. So we bought albino male, albino female, and a het female. So a trio. We paid $18,000 for the trio.
What?
Yeah. Oh, they were big dollars back then, right? That was when they first came out. They're worth like $300 now. In fact, it's very hard to find a pure albino Darwin now because they're all being mixed with every other morph. So there's your Morelia milkshakes for you. But, you know, so we bought them and they're at my house, got them up to size, bred them. 2 very successful clutches. They all hatched, right? Had like, I can't remember exact numbers, but it was good numbers. Let's say 20 albinos and like 10 hets from the 2 clutches, right? So it was an albino male over albino female, full clutch albinos, albino male over het female, 50-50 clutch, right? Good numbers. We were punching the air because they were at that stage, they had dropped to probably be about $4,000 a snake. We were sitting pretty happy, right? We're going to make some good coin. Not a single baby shed. They wouldn't shed. It didn't matter what we did. They would not get that first sloth off. I've never seen anything like it. I've never experienced anything like it. It's like that first layer of skin was almost like super glued to their bloody body because they end up just going all shriveled up and wrinkled, right? Keeping in mind, between us at that stage, we both had like dozens of clutches of snakes. Like, it's not like we were amateur. We knew what we were doing. You don't go and put that much money into a pair of snakes without having experience. We knew what we were doing. We'd already made our mistakes in the hobby. we were very confident. They came out. We're like, sweet, the hard bart's done. We'll get these established. We're sitting good. And none of them shed. They all died. They all died. One by one, we sat there and watched all of these snakes die over a few months. Got to the point where we were cyst feeding them and all this kind of stuff. And you could see the layers of skin were building up on top of them. It was almost like the enzyme or whatever it is that they should be secreting to help them get that skin off was not happening for them. They were deficient or something.
Wow.
And they just would not shed. All right. That was painstaking and devastating. All right. My biggest accomplishment to date would be the lace monitors. Despite all of the snakes and stuff, I've of course kept a lot of lizards, blueies and eastern beardies. I love eastern bearded dragons. Like you guys, I don't even know if you guys have eastern bearded dragons over there. You guys just have centrals by the look of it. I think you got a few pygmies and stuff as well, but for the most part, centrals are the popular ones because they're colorful.
Yeah.
I love the eastern ones. You get them around here a lot as well. Not as pretty looking, but they're just cool. Yeah, so I've had them. I've had lots of eastern beardies and blue tongues. My 5-year-old has a blotched blue tongue as a pet. But lace monitors were always something I wanted, right? Because they're just like big dinosaurs. So I've got a couple of Bell's Phase lace monitors. Again, it took me a long time because, we're talking 2008 probably. 2008, I bought a baby Bell's Phase lace monitor, and it was just the cutest thing on earth. Grew it up, turned into this like 5-foot monster, something like that. It's so awesome. Mabel.
Were you keeping it indoors or outdoors?
It was indoor for a while. Eventually, of course, it goes outdoors. Like, I've seen people try to keep them indoors, and I've seen people, even in Australia, some of the guys who keep them indoors reasonably successful. But for ultimate success, you got to keep them outside. Like, they're big animals, right? Like, they need to be outside. If you want to breed them successfully, they need room. Like, they're not like a snake. They're not a slow-moving, lethargic animal that just sits down and does nothing, right? They prowl around a lot, right? They'll cook in the sun and then just prance around their aviary for a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I had a mate who he had a few laces as well, and he called me up one day. He's like, Jason, I got this Bell's female. And I'm like freaking out because I'm like, holy shit, a female Bell's, right? Because back then I didn't even know if you could get a female Bell's lacy because like I'd never seen one or heard of one, right? I didn't know a single person on earth that had a pair of Bell's Phase lace monitors. Like I didn't know of anyone who had a pair of them. You just saw people with a bunch of normals and maybe one Bell's, right? Anyway, so he calls me up. He's like, man, I got a male that's going absolutely mental because there's 2 females, 2 males. He goes, I need to separate these. He goes, if you want the female, I need you to come now. You can have her for like, I think it was like $800 or something. I'm like, dude, I'll be there in like 20 minutes. I'm coming right now. I rocked up with like some massive duffel bag, right? And I just gave him the cash. This snake, this lizard was grumpy as, threw her in the bag, took her home. She settled down very quick as soon as she was out of that, environment where she was pretty much, under a lot of pressure. So put her in with my male, and it was fine. I could literally walk in. So I had him in a custom enclosure I had built. It was 4 meters. Again, you want feet because you guys are crazy. Probably like 13 feet by 10 feet. Like good size. Yeah. And big branches, pond, everything like that. It was awesome. In my mum's backyard. My mum put up with a lot of crap, right? Like, here I am, this 18-year-old. And even before that, like, I had snakes in my bedroom, in a spare room. I had enclosures in the dining room next to the dining table and in the downstairs rumpus room, and outside I had this massive goanna aviary, right? So they were just everywhere, and she was fine. I had fish tanks as well. Like she's just like, wow. She knew I loved animals. I looked after them, and yeah, I had great success with them. I had two years in a row they bred for me, and I had 2 successful clutches. And if you know, they take, I think it's like 280 days they incubate in the incubator for. So, geez, that's a test of patience. They take forever to incubate. 100% success rate on hatching both clutches. Wow. Nothing but baby Bell's Phase lace monitors. I never produced a normal looking one. They were only Bell's Phase, so that was awesome. And that was like, even to this day, probably like the most awesome accomplishment in keeping reptiles I've ever had, because they're just the coolest dinosaurs on earth. I love lacy. And then after that, it was at the same time that I had those greens. And as I said, that's when I bought a house. I had to sell the greens, had to sell the laces, kept a couple of womas and some smaller stuff, a diamond and a roughie, because I love rough scale pythons as well. Absolutely one of my favorite snakes. And then, it was only, I guess not that long ago where I started to kind of ramp up what I'm keeping again with those other things in mind. It's like in terms of, I don't want to keep just to produce. I want to keep to find fulfillment in what I find interesting, what I, draw my passion from. And really it comes down to, as I said, it's not about the reproduction stuff. It's just about what I get my kicks out of. So for the diamonds, it's the outside thing. For the greens, it's a little bit more of the reproduction, I'll be honest, because they're just gorgeous, right? Like, again, I'm very lucky. I prefer yellow over red neos. It's just, I'm not ashamed to say that. I love yellow neos. So those little banana yellow babies, I can't wait to see some of them hopefully this year. That'll be cool. And I don't know, like she could be sitting on, slugs. I doubt it. She would have pushed them out, but she pushed nothing out. So I'm assuming they're all good. I haven't posted pictures of any of that because, it's that's for me. You know what I mean? Like it's my personal thing. To be honest, even now talking to you about it, it's the first time I've actually mentioned it. Even my closest mates in the hobby don't even know I've got a green tree python sitting on eggs right now. I haven't shared that because most of my mates keep like the Enclosure, right? The spotted pythons, and they're into all the mutation stuff and that. So we usually talk about that. And I usually just keep pretty quiet amongst my close reptile mates when it comes to the greens, because it's like, I do this for me, right? They don't keep greens. They don't keep roughies. Some of them keep diamonds. But I just do this part for me, and hopefully she hatches something, and there could be 1 or 2, there could be 10, there could be 15. I don't know, but I can tell you whatever she hatches is not going anywhere. I don't care if there's 20 of them. They're staying here until they've gone right through their color change. I don't care how many there are. And next year I'm trying 4 girls. And if I get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 clutches, guess what? They're not going anywhere either until they've all had their color change, because I have no issue keeping, 20, 30, 40, 50 young green tree pythons, because, you started off saying earlier, you're scared of them. They are the easiest snake to keep, in my opinion. I know it sounds a little bit, some people find that surprising, but these guys require a lot less effort and work from me compared to the spotted pythons.
Wow.
That's the truth. Like, I just don't do anything for these guys, right? Like, they feed less, they poo less, they require less interaction. Interaction is the wrong word, right? Because I can see them all the time. I don't have to kind of go looking for them to do some kind of health inspection, if that makes sense, right? So with everything else, if they're in a hide box or something like that, and I'm just doing like a general checkup on them, like, when I'm checking water bowls and things like that, if I open an enclosure to clean a water bowl, which I try to do once a week, I will naturally, lift the hide and just, poke the snake and make sure it's all fine. Otherwise, I might not see it, right? I might literally not see the animal. That is something I routinely have to do for everything other than the green tree pythons. Otherwise, I don't see them. With the greens, I don't have to do that. I just open them, I take the water bowl, I put it back, and I see them every single day, because they're all right there, very much in plain sight. Sure, I might have to just kind of look sideways because they're under a leaf or something, but they're there. And sure enough, every single night the lights switch off, and all 9 of them just bang, hunt mode every night. I could have fed them last night, and bang, tonight they're in ambush mode.
Wow.
Every time. So their behavior is almost extremely predictable because they're psycho feeders at night, right? And I can tell as soon as something doesn't go into ambush position at night, that animal's in shed, right? Like they're if you see it and you observe it, I find them easy. Sure, as soon as you've dialed in their enclosure, and I don't particularly think that's that hard, right? You just set their temperature. Like, you think of it this way, right? You keep any other snake, carpet python or spotted python, or for you guys over there, whatever species it is, they have a desired temperature, right? You might set your thermostat to 33 degrees Celsius, and I might set my thermostat to 29 degrees Celsius for a green tree python. That's kind of the only difference in terms of that. Of course, you got your temperature gun and your thermometers, and you're just checking that things are dialed in. You should always do this before you put an animal in a box anyway, right? You've got to make sure it's dialing in. You've got to make sure you've got everything set the way you want. Once you've got your box set and everything's good, the rest is just a very simple routine. I have a very defined regimen of how regularly I clean it, how I clean it, and when I do my water bowl changes and stuff. And I don't have to do anything else. That's it. For feeding, I feed them like every 2 to 3 weeks. Like, it's super easy. I don't have to tease them or play around with them. Those things will literally launch out and grab me if I'm not on my toes, right? Right.
Yeah.
Some other things you kind of got to, they're in their hide, so you got to lift the hide, and then they're not in the mood because you didn't realize the animal is in shed, because you didn't go in there and move everything around and disturb them to find out that, hey, this animal might not feed today. You thawed out the rodent for no point because they're in shed mode. So
yeah,
I'm of the opinion that in keeping them, I think they're a dream animal to keep, because they just don't require much effort for your maintenance once you've got them dialed in. And they're just beautiful to look at. Like, they're ideal display animal. They're just there all day, every day, looking right back at me.
Are you keeping them on substrate or paper?
Substrate.
Okay. What do you use for substrate?
What do they call it? Cocoa bark type thing. So it's basically a bark made out of coconut husk or shells or whatever they use, right?
Yeah.
Why do I use that? I don't know. I've actually recently been looking for an alternative, but price-wise, I decided it's not really worth an alternative. So I was looking at the local hardware for different bark options. There are pine bark, so from pine trees, non-treated natural pine bark options, which is rather cost-effective. I was very tempted by that, but then I'm not sure that the pine bark is as absorbent. And I'm also not super confident that it has not been treated, despite them saying it hasn't been.
Yeah.
Why should I trust them? Maybe the warehouse that the pallets with all of that crap is sitting on has been sprayed. I don't know, right? So I'm a little bit reluctant to shift it, because, when you heat up, I use heat panels. I heat up the enclosure. I don't want, fumes and, the whatever's coming off that to aerosolize or something like that and cause some kind of issues. So I've decided I'll just stick with this bark. I think it's costing me about $23 a bag, and one bag does 2 enclosures. And I'm doing a complete change out of that substrate at the moment, I'm doing it every 6 months, and it seems to be working. I was kind of like, do I do it more or, more frequently or less frequently? Like, you can debate these things with yourself all day long about how infrequently or frequently you should or shouldn't do it. I don't know, so, the people who don't use substrate, where they just use like a puppy pad or paper, they have a very valid point of like, well, at least when my snake does a shit on paper, I swap it out 100% and I know that it's clean again. That's an incredibly valid point, and there is no disputing that. And that's why I'm always like, do I clean it good enough, regularly enough? Right. And I think you can debate these things with yourself all day long if you're mindful of what's best for the animal. Right. So I don't know, I'm on the fence. It seems to be working. And again, I have a routine, right? So I don't do all 9 at once for these guys on the wall behind me. It's too much work. I don't have time for that. I've got 2 kids and I just don't have time. So I tend to break it up where I kind of I do 3 at a time, and I do 1 month I do these 3, and the next month I do those 3, the next month I do those 3, the next month I do these ones over here, and then I've got other ones, and I just kind of work my way back. Right. So that's kind of how I'm doing it at the moment, and it works. The other effort involved, which those who use paper towels and not paper towel, like the nappy pads, will be laughing at, thinking, God, this is more reason not to do substrate. Substrate, I can't just dump it straight in. It requires a little bit of cleaning. I find it dusty as heck, right?
Yeah.
So even though they say, oh, it's been cleaned and washed and all this shit, I actually have like a 2 meter, or what's that, like 6 foot by, maybe 6 foot by 3 foot fly screen. And I dump the whole bag of substrate on that, and I sieve it. And the amount of dust that comes out, or like small sand grain size particles that come out, so much.
Yeah, I use the same stuff. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I hate that stuff, right? So I like to get that out, because I don't like dumping a bag in. It's just like, poof, this plume of dusty stuff in there, right? And
I don't like that. So I try to sieve all that out because it just ensures that it can, because here's my logic. If I don't take that out and the snake does the shit, there's obviously the liquid component to that. When I do my spot clean, of course, if the poo is this big, I try to clean a much larger area to make sure I get all of it. Once I clean that, I usually just use F10, the disinfectant, sprayed into, and then I just use that wet wipe to wipe that area as well. If I don't do that, it's very likely some of those smaller dusty portions are going to absorb some of that, liquid component of the poo in that, and I'm just not going to get that out. It's just not going to come when I grab it all out. So I'm just trying to mitigate that. I've also found in some of those bags, although it's probably like 1 in every 20, I've had dust mites. So we're not talking reptile mites. Dust mites are harmless. They're literally not going to get on the animal. They don't care if they're going to die off anyway. But I just don't like that. Yeah. So I went through a phase of literally baking the substrate at 200 degrees for 10 minutes before I even use that, because I just don't want this stuff, right? Got to keep it clean. So everything
I put everything, all my bags of substrate that I get in, I put them directly into the freezer, and they stay in the deep freezer. Yep. And then I hydrate it and put it in, and then I don't get those little wood mites, which will just get totally out of hand. I mean, you'll get 100%. Tons of them.
Yeah, it just gets a mess. So everything in here is plastic or sterile as much as can be. So they're all PVC. PVC enclosures with heat panels. Everything is on its own separate day-night thermostat. You've just a standard like LED strip light, from the local hardware on a timer, and the perches are PVC pipe. I haven't heated them or melted them or shaped them or anything like that. They're not painted. I actually have vinyl wrapped them. So just off eBay, I just got some vinyl wrap and wrapped them, and that's worked fantastic. It's super cheap, super easy, and you can get like 100 different patterns. You could literally get wood grain, so it just looks like a perfect branch if you wanted to.
Oh wow!
That worked well. I was just looking for a cheap, nasty option because I had every intention of going and getting branches from the bush, but I just haven't got around to it. And then I did this, and I'm like, I might just stick with this. It's working. So I PVC wrapped every perch, super easy. And then all of the plants, so I've got 3 plants in each of them. They're all plastic plants. Again, super easy. I take them into the bathtub when I clean the enclosure, and I just turn the hot water on as hot as I can. And I've got a little hose, like the hoses that you can use to rinse your baby or a puppy type thing. And I just literally wash the whole plant in like scalding hot water, and I just leave it there to dry for a few minutes, and then just pop it in. It doesn't even matter if it's still wet. I just pop it back in, and that's fine. And then I just F10 the whole thing as well and put the snake in. And so what I try to do is clean the bark obviously ahead of time. But once the bark's clean, it takes me like, it's probably not even 10 minutes to clean the whole enclosure, because everything's quick, right? It's just everything out, wash it, everything back in, clean, done, put the animal back in. It's efficient.
Do you have to mist them? Like, how do you keep their humidity?
I do mist. Do I have to mist them? It's like it's debatable, right? You can hear it. I listen to the Trap Talk. I listen to the Condor Lounge. I listen to all those guys, and you can hear it with all the people they interview. Some do, some don't. It's clearly a topic for debate. I definitely think there's a personal preference element, but there's definitely depends on your room, depends on where you live. There's all of it, depends on your ventilation. I wish I had more ventilation. I actually opted to have less ventilation. Probably in hindsight, I should have gone more ventilation and misted more. I think that would have been a better option, but you can never get it right. You can only ever make improvements, right? And I'm sure if I had gone more ventilation and misted more, I probably would have been like, I should have done it this other way anyway, right?
Yeah.
There's always improvements, I think. But I have a regular misting regimen of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? I don't mist at the exact same time every day. In fact, if you look in the tropics, it's very often that most of the heavy rainfall is in the afternoon. right? Which means that a lot of the environment is wet come late evening, right? It hasn't necessarily entirely dried out. Everything's a bit damp. But I don't want to do that because I also drop my temperatures at night, and I don't want them to be in a wet, damp, cooler environment, right? Because I also think, well, if I don't have the same airflow as a natural rainforest, I don't want to create that environment that could make them sick, for example. So there's all these little considerations that you can overthink and ponder about, but what I'm doing works, right? So generally I spray sometime mid-morning, so it's generally dried off by afternoon. If I see an animal coming into shed, I do usually mist it maybe once more, and that has worked for me. Look, the only reason I've done that is because maybe 1 in every 20 sheds I found I was getting a little bit of retained skin. All right, this was some time ago, and since then, because I've implemented that additional misting, I've pretty much mitigated all of that. I haven't had to soak a snake in years, and I can't be bothered soaking snakes. It's just a pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
It comes with a whole lot of other risks and headaches and stuff, and you don't want to soak them in cold water, you don't want to soak them in hot water, so you've got to get the tub, and I put a thermometer in there, make sure it's sitting around 29 degrees, and I've got to be kind of watching that temperature to make sure it doesn't drop to 25 degrees, which it can pretty damn quickly, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like, it's just easier to just give them an extra few sprays of water and then just not have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm very lucky. I literally work in this room. This is my desk. This is my work computer. So it's very easy for me to observe their behaviors and things like that. But that's what works for me. Even so with the breeding, again, we've all got our different theories on this. I think Justin Julander's book. I should have brought it. It's in the other room. Really good book on the green tree pythons. Sorry, the name evades me at the moment. It's the natural history one, and basically talks about like their ecology and what research papers and stuff you might know of it. But I'm a scientist, so those kind of factual things just make sense to me, and that gives me some food for thought. And I just try to go with what makes sense, not necessarily what people are doing. So, if you were to ask me who's my mentor with breeding green tree pythons, or who do I get my advice from, I'd be like, well, I haven't really got my advice from anyone. I've bounced some ideas off some people that I know, but I'm just doing what makes sense, if that makes, I'm breeding them the way I breed everything, to be honest. So, I temperature cycle them, I light cycle them, I food cycle them, and I humidity cycled them, because that's what happens here in Australia, right? Now, I know that a lot of the chondros in the US they're all from New Guinea, right? And obviously that's a very different climate, and they don't probably have the same, fluctuations we have here in the Cape York. But that is what happens here, right? And if you look at the temperatures, we do have a winter drop, be it small, but there's a winter drop. And we do have a wet season and a dry season, right? Which means there is a humidity spike in certain parts of the year. And we do have a change in photo period between summer and winter, right? And there is an abundance of food at certain times of the year. And they are a Morelia, right? And when you breed diamonds, what do we talk about? How cold can we make them in winter? How long do we cycle them for? We talk about Bredli and inland carpets, and we talk about all these other things. Like, there is no other python in Australia we don't cycle, right? We cycle everything. So I cycle spotted pythons. Well, spotted pythons are also found in the Iron Ranges, right? We cycle Darwin carpets, and we cycle, and I'm assuming they're similar. What's that, latitude, longitude, whatever. We cycle roughies. These animals are all similar in terms of where they're located. Just makes sense to me, right? Yeah. So I cycled them. If the way I did it is, so our winter here is kind of what is it? It's kind of, I basically, coming into April, I actually ramped up the food. So I basically said to my snakes, hey guys, here's an abundance of food and here's an abundance of humidity, and it's warm. It's warm, it's humid, you got tons of food, and you got 14 hours of sunlight, right? It's happy days, right? You guys are living the best life right now. And then towards the end of April, I stopped feeding them, right? Now, when I say abundance of food, I fed them weekly. I just reduced the food size. Instead of like an adult mouse, I would go to like a weaner mouse. I didn't want to make them fat, right? I just wanted them to be like, oh man, food on tap. This is great, right? I wanted them to feel a significant change in their environment, right? To simulate that shift in condition. And then what I did is food cycle them. So I took them off the food, make sure they empty their bowels. And then I started dropping their temperatures. So I already give them a day-night cycle anyway. So it's about 29 during the day and it's about 26 during the night. I just brought that down about 2 to 3 degrees. All right. Obviously, I brought that down over about a month. And then I left it like that for about 2 months, thereabouts. Can't tell you exactly. I have to look at my records. Same with the humidity. So for the month of April, I was spraying them every 2 days and a good spray. All right. Then while I stopped their food and when I was bringing down their temperatures, instead of every 2 days, I started spraying them just twice a week. And instead of maybe spraying them for like 30 seconds with my spray bottle, it would be like just 5 seconds. So humidity would be probably spiking to the same relative humidity, right? But instead of 8 hours of, a good humidity spike, it'd be like an hour, right? So it was a little bit drier, cooler, no food, and the light went from 14 hours down to about 10 hours, right? Then their activity level dropped. Their hunting mode, ambush position, just switched off. No ambush position anymore. They would just stay in their cold spot. They moved from their heat panel under the cold. They went to the cold end and stayed there. And that was it. Couple of weeks, male went in with the female and he did not leave her alone, right? Not at all. And then a couple of months of that, and next thing you know, I noticed they've both shifted towards under the heat panel and locking up there. Ovulation, as soon as I start to see the ovulation, bang, I crank the temperatures back up, pull him out, and then that's it. She just went through her normal cycle. And that's exactly what I do with any other carpet or spotted python or anything for that matter, literally anything, because that's what, again, I'm not talking about what happens in New Guinea because it's kind of irrelevant, right? I work with Australian greens. They are Morelia viridis. They're the same as the Arus, the same as Marookis. They're all viridis at the end of the day. They're the southern greens. So far, it's worked. Like I said, she's on eggs. I've got no babies. So who am I to say it hasn't worked yet? It has worked so far, right? So fingers crossed that's worked, but it's so far so good. But that's the general approach I take to things. I just look, well, where's it from and how's it work? Same with the diamonds. Putting it outside makes sense because that's what it looks like outside. All right.
Yeah, and you can't get the inside of your house that cold. You can't get it down into the 40s.
No, exactly. I literally couldn't get it down to 40s. Not a chance in hell.
Yeah, your wife would probably kill you.
I'd love to. I love cold, man. I love the cold.
So what size enclosure do you keep your Antaresia in?
I want them in 3x2x2s, to be honest. That's the idea. They're the roughies. Sorry, I just had him out from before.
Oh, nice. I love the roughies.
These are unreal, man. These should be in everyone's house. These are unreal space. These are such a cool little snake.
Oh, they're so cool. Look at that giant head.
Look at those eyes, dude.
Yeah.
These really are the little rock chondros. Such an arboreal snake.
Yeah.
You can just tell by the way they hold on to you. All right. Like he just wraps me up so good to hold on. Better than the little diamonds, for example. Little diamonds' tails just flop down. You know what I mean? Like you'd say semi-arboreal. But these guys genuinely, I feel like they know what they're doing when they're up on a branch.
Yeah.
They're just such an amazing little snake. My family don't like them. They're like, they're just boring. They're so drab looking. And I'm like, but they're so awesome.
Yeah.
So, but such a cool snake. Sorry to just derail. I just saw him in the corner of my eye, and I'm just like, God, I love this snake.
Yeah, no, they're awesome, awesome little animals.
So these are still an advanced license in New South Wales.
Okay.
This is
That's
like the
interesting.
perfect first snake for anyone. They're so easy to look after.
So do you need in order to breed snakes, do you need to have the advanced license?
No, not at all. So
Okay.
advanced license just distinguishes between, I guess, what they consider to be either more endangered, more protected species, or more advanced to keep, and hence requires a more advanced keeper.
Okay.
It could be because of the level of experience to keep it, or just purely because it's a dangerous animal, right? Like a lace monitor is a dangerous animal,
Yeah.
right? Who was it? I think it was MJ, right? Or somebody was saying the other day that one of their laces went into the sun for the first time, and they were like, "Whoa, this is a different animal." Yes, right. You put a lacy under out in the sun. Whoa, even a blue tongue, right?
Yeah.
Like anything, you put it outside, that thing turns into it's like a wild switch turns on, right?
Yeah.
So you've got so like having certain animals like a lace monitor on an advanced license just makes sense, because they are an animal that can be underestimated. I actually got bitten by my lacy on that finger, and I've still got a scar from like God knows how many years ago. I nearly lost my finger.
Jeez.
But and it was my own fault. It wasn't his fault. I just moved him into the new enclosure, and I went in there to check on him. I hadn't fed him for it'd only been like a day. I hadn't fed him because I didn't want to move him into the new enclosure with a gut full of food, right?
Yeah.
No different than when you're freighting an animal. You don't feed them and then stick them in a freight box, right? Like you give them, you send them on an empty stomach because you don't want to stress them out. But it was a situation like that. I just went in there one morning to check on him just to make sure he was settling into the new enclosure. And he just came walking up to me, and I could see it was like a feed response. Like his head was twitchy, his tongue was flicking like crazy. And I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, this guy thinks I've got food, and I do not have food right now. And I started panicking because I'm like, oh crap. Like I was kind of cornered. And I kind of just put my hand out because I had no shoes on. Right.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, right. It was not a very wise thing. He's a very friendly lacy. I could walk in and cuddle him and pat him and scratch him under the chin and everything, but not when they're in feed mode.
Yeah.
He just, like, I just did this to get his head away from my feet, and he just launched and just chomp. And I moved my hand, but he still like scratched me, but deep. I had to then pin him and run out of the enclosure with him, threw him in, shut the door, collapsed, blood everywhere. I was in agony, and he's jumped onto the front of the cage trying to get out because he's like, I want to eat you.
Yeah.
Anyway, it makes sense that some things are on the advanced license. So no, the advanced license, sorry, going back to your question, the advanced license does not dictate. It's nothing to do with breeding. It's purely there for if it's more endangered, or if it's more dangerous, or if it's just maybe more experience required to keep it. That's where it comes into it. So I would anticipate that hopefully when the Owen Pelly is available to the New South Wales keepers, it'll certainly be on an advanced license. And that's totally reasonable because of its status in the captivity, but also in nature. But yeah, that we'll have to wait and see. But certain things will be on there for just too long. So you may know the story behind the rough scale python and how it came into captivity with John Weigel from the Reptile Park in Gosford. And he obviously had quite a few trips over to the Kimberley to find a founding group, set up a colony, started the breeding program, successfully got that established, sold them into captivity. And that was on an advanced license. And again, understandably so, given the nature of the project and its rarity in captivity, and even in its geographical spread is so tiny. It makes sense. But time has come. It's got to be dropped, as in it needs to be moved to the basic category, because we now know a lot more about it. It's not a hard species to keep. It's not a hard species to breed. It's a very good species. It's a very easy one to keep. It's a great first snake. And because they keep it on that advanced license for too long, I don't know the numbers, but it's fair to say that a very small portion of the reptile keeping community have an advanced license, right? And in fact, it's actually harder to acquire that advanced license today than what it was years ago. Now, for example, if you want an advanced license to keep a green tree python, you must have kept an advanced python prior to that, where before, for example, I got my advanced license, I had never kept a goanna in my life, and I was able to go out and buy the lace monitor, right? Didn't matter that I'd never kept a monitor in my life. I was qualified to have the advanced license. I can buy anything on there. So problem is, because the group with advanced license is smaller, the desire for them to all keep and breed rough scale pythons is not really there. The market is small. The value of them is cheap. They're worth like $200, right? The problem is, what you see now is a decline in the captive population, I suppose. Like, they're not getting pumped out. They're actually not that easy to find now here. Like, they're not like, if you want a carpet python, they're everywhere. You want a rough scale python, you might have to wait until breeding season and find a breeder and actually kind of make some effort to find it, because they're just not so readily available, because nobody's bothering to breed them as much. You know, you could breed an albino Darwin carpet python. They're worth $350, and they're a fantastic first snake, and everybody getting into the hobby wants a beautiful albino, right? Rough scale python, no. You know, 1% of the population keeping snakes can keep it. It's not the most desirable snake because it's not the prettiest or coolest thing on the block. And why pay more for an advanced license to keep a drab-looking snake in many people's eyes? So why breed it?
So when you do breed a snake over there, with do you have to keep some sort of a record of how many you produced, and then, like, whoever you sell it to, do they have to retain those records so that the way they have proof of who it came from? And is there like a chain of custody that is sort of in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have it's actually all down at the moment, because the national parks, their online portal had some issues, but it's basically an online record keeper's book. And what that is when I do sell something, let's say you're in New South Wales, I'm selling you a snake. You have your license and I have mine. I will go onto my book and I will say that on today's date, I sold an animal to Adam. Adam lives in suburb, postcode, and whatever. Adam's reptile license number is this. I sold Adam one rough scale python, and I will put next to that the animal code, right? So every animal has a specific animal code, right? Like, just as an identifier, a barcode for that species, not for the individual animal, just a species number, right? So that'll all get documented, and that's it. I just hit submit, right? And then that just documents that I have now kind of transferred that to you. You do the same thing, right? On this date, I bought off Jason, this species, this animal, this number, and Jason's license number is this, and Jason lives in this suburb of Sydney, right? So that's the transfer. We do that for every transaction, every single transaction. You sell 100 snakes, you're doing that 100 times, right? If I breed something, let's say I breed 16 rough scale pythons, I go on and I just say that on this date, I produce 16 rough scale pythons, right? A little bit easier. I don't have to put license details and stuff. I just say I put 16, and that then just shows on my records, I now have an additional 16 rough scale pythons. And I'll just see the tally of everything I've got, each of the species and each of the total number of each of those species that I have on my records. Right. And of course, then when I say I've sold you one, my total will decrease by 1, right? Gets a little bit more difficult if you're living in a different state or territory because you have a different licensing system. In those instances, yes, we probably have similar situations where I'll have to stick it on a plane and send it to you, right? So I export it to you and you would be importing it into your state. There are freight companies that assist us with that. It used to be as simple as rocking up to the airport with your snake in a box and just sending it off. The airports don't allow that anymore, and we have to use a couple of registered businesses who take care of the paperwork. That's fine. Kind kind of makes it a bit easier, I suppose. But we need to do some additional paperwork now. I have to then go online and apply for an export permit. So ahead of the deal, you will give me all of the same details, your license number and what we're buying, et cetera, et cetera. I then go online and fill out a piece of paper that says I'm exporting it to you in this state. This is your license number and same details. And then I pay a fee. I think it's about $30. And then I will get a permit sent to me, which is an export permit. And then when I enter the records on my books to say that I sold you a snake, I will enter all the same details I did before, but I will also have to enter my export permit number, right? And then I'll send a copy of my export permit to you with the snake. And you will do similar on your end. You would have to apply for an import permit on your end, and similarly do all the kind of paperwork. So it's a little bit of a headache. I guess we're just used to it, right? It's literally been like this for nearly 30 years, I suppose. So we don't really know any other way. But geez, it'd be nice not to have to do it, I'll be honest. But it's just what we're so used to. It's just frustrating.
It seems like there's a lot of benefits to it. You know, I keep thinking like, man, it'd be so cool if I could keep a Burmese python or a reticulated python. And if we had something like that in place in Florida, rather than an outright ban, you know, I'd take that any day.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like people would be a lot less likely to go through all that and then say, you know what, I'm done with this retech. I'm going to dump it in the woods, you know, and now, do you guys have that? Is that an issue that you guys have over in Australia? People just releasing captive animals?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can't think of any instance I've heard of that happening. I'm not going to say it doesn't because, look, again, who am I to know? But
sure.
I can't imagine it would be common because, like, what would be the point? You know, you're not going to get in trouble for having it if you've got your license. If you don't want the animal anymore, just give it to somebody.
Yeah.
You know, because you're allowed, assuming you're licensed, you're allowed to have it. If you don't want it, just give it up to somebody. You know, just sell it, give it away for free, put it on a classifieds or something. I think the issue can look. I don't know what instigated people letting things go in the US, but what I think could contribute that into the future is I think there is the potential risk of an overproduction of animals, right? And I think that's going to happen inevitably here. Like, you know, I keep hearing from some of the podcasts that you guys have like 50,000 ball pythons available at any one time on Morph Market and stuff. Right? I'm like, holy crap, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it's a little oversaturated.
Yeah, but like, what happens if I'm just some guy with a pet ball python, and for whatever reason, I'm living in a rental property and I'm not allowed to keep my snake anymore, and I've got to get rid of it, and I've got 6 weeks to get rid of my ball python. Yeah. And nobody wants it. I put it up for free. I'm handing out flyers. I've got it on Walmart. Nobody wants it. What am I going to do? What do I do, right? Maybe that pushes people to let things go. I don't know, right? Maybe instances like that in extreme cases, people start to do dumb things and let things go. I don't know. You know, because I definitely see the hobbyists, the breeders want to keep prices at an acceptable level. And I agree with that. You know, a lot of effort goes into this. You know, some people, snakes are expensive. Some breeders want too much money. It's like a lot of effort goes into this, guys. Like a lot of work goes into breeding snakes. And that's why I don't want to breed too many either, right? Like I can't imagine producing more than 3 or 4 clutches. It's just too much effort. It's too much work. Not when you're working full time. Right, it starts to lose the joy and the passion because it becomes a chore, right? There's nothing fun about cleaning 100 water dishes, right? It's just not fun. And if the hobby becomes one of just primarily maintenance and dealing with pain in the ass snakes that won't feed, and then dealing with 80% of the people who want to buy snakes are wasting your time, the passion becomes, overshadowed by frustrations and, it's not very enjoyable. But yeah, I think that it's very easy for the market to become saturated, and the hobbyist breeders want to keep prices at a stable and respectable price point, so animals don't become disposable. But inevitably, you have people who will buy animals, and some will not enjoy it after a year or two, like anything. All right, they'll buy their first snake, a year or two later, they don't want it. They've lost their interest. They want to sell it, and they will struggle to part with that animal. All right, they won't know how to dispose of it. They won't know how to sell it. They won't know the avenues or the websites and that to sell it. We don't have Morph Market. We've got a couple of online classifieds, but everybody's out there constantly saying buy from a reputable breeder, buy from a reputable source. But unfortunately, for those individuals who have lost interest and want to sell that animal, they aren't a reputable breeder, and they aren't necessarily a reputable source. They're an unknown source. They're just some random, right? Could be a fantastic animal, but it's unknown. And they kind of get lumped with an animal they don't want. The animal gets neglected. Maybe it gets dumped. Maybe it gets, malnourished. Maybe it doesn't get fed. Maybe they just turn the heat off or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of instances, there's a lot of scenarios that could lead to people releasing animals and things like this. But it's a hobby that, due to the sheer numbers of the common animals that people keep, it becomes saturated. And I think that's what you see in the ballpark of morphs and stuff over there. Perhaps, like, I can't believe 50,000 bloody ball pythons on Morph Market. Like, it's outrageous.
Well, and the amount of boa constrictors too. I mean, it's wild. Considering the long-term enclosure size and responsibility that it is for a boa constrictor. Just a morph, imperator. It's like, man, that's a lot of animals that downstream will end up being a big responsibility. And that's what you see a lot. You go on Craigslist or some classified website and you see, boa constrictor with a 55-gallon aquarium, and the person just wants it gone. And this poor thing is coiled from one side to the other and it hardly fits in there. And you're like, oh man, like, it tears your heart out seeing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. What are reptile shows like over there? Do you guys have shows? Are they?
We do, and look, they're pretty cool. I think it's an important part, and I think, look, there's a lady in Queensland I think's doing an absolute kick-ass job at setting some up there. Like, they've been around for about, maybe not quite 20 years, but not far off. We've been having reptile shows for about 20 years. They're not on the scale of, your big NARBCs and things like that. They're just not that big yet. But I think one of the recent ones in Sydney had about, I think, close to 40 vendors, which is big for us, right? That's big. You've got to remember the community here is much smaller. Like, a population of Australia is like not even 10% of the US.
And none of those are ball python breeders, so that's even more impressive.
Exactly, right? Like, you guys wouldn't know what to do. Imagine going to a reptile show and 40 vendors didn't have ball pythons. Like,
I couldn't imagine that. Yeah, just when you said that, I was thinking, like, 40 vendors. Maybe that's not that much, but then I think about a local show I go to, Tampa Repticon. It's a huge show, but it's just ball pythons from wall to wall everywhere.
Oh gosh, look, I'll be honest. When I got into reptiles, ball pythons were like the envy of my eye, right? Because 20 years ago we didn't have morphs over here.
Yeah,
there was nothing. It was just wild type stuff, and wild type stuff is still like, it's just, I love that stuff. But who was that? Was it Nick Martin? I think the other day on your pages, on one of yours as well, was saying, like, it's funny how everybody now is like, we're trying to breed everything that's cool out of the snake. It's like, let's take away the color and let's take away the pattern and let's take away what makes that thing cool, right?
Yeah.
I think it was him, but I just laugh because I'm like, yeah, exactly. It's kind of ironic, right? It's like, you got some awesome snakes with these crazy wild type patterns that just look phenomenal. And it's like, here's a great idea. Let's rip the pattern out and the color out and dilute it and make it dull and, make it gray. Find it exciting, but it's funny that we're quite literally taking everything cool away from it. If you reverse it, imagine you find a wild snake that's just kind of plain white, and then you breed it, and suddenly you crack the egg open. It's like it's got pattern and crazy color, and you'd be like, this is amazing. You'd be so happy. It's like we just love reverse engineering things, I guess, as humans. We love change. But
well, I think it's Nick that said that you know, the morphs aren't better, they're just different. You know,
yeah,
it's
100%.
it's just different.
100%. And we're losing all the cool wild type stuff here, man. We could talk on that. We should talk on that, but oh god, I miss that wild type stuff here. But going back to the hobby,
I want you to talk about the intergrades a little bit, because we were talking about that privately maybe a few days ago, a week ago, I think.
Yeah.
And
We'll come back to that. Let's talk on the shows a bit first, because the shows are a big thing. And I'm excited for what the future brings. I think it's inevitable we'll head down the path of the US, right? I think we're going to get bigger and cooler and more elaborate shows. They're a little bit, I'm going to sound critical here, and this is not a jab at the guys and the people who organize them, because there's a lot of work and effort and money that goes into setting these things up. And in Australia, there's not a lot of a return on investment for these shows, right? You know, you guys over there are getting some big sponsorships at your shows, right? You got Exoterra and, you know, all these massive brands are rocking up and sponsoring these expos, and they're probably putting a lot of money into their sponsorships. We're not getting that, right? We've got local herb societies are organizing fantastic reptile expos where the breeders can come and set up a table. The tables are usually like 7 foot by 3 foot type thing, or 7 foot by 2 foot. That's your stall. You might have 20 to 40 baby snakes or something available on it. And because of the laws, you're not allowed, technically speaking, you're not allowed branding. Like, you're not allowed to display a business, right? So you could only put like your name and your reptile license number behind you, technically. So it's a little bit down-regulated in that regards. Some of the local pet shops will come and set up some of their products to sell some of their products, but it really is more of a local breeders selling expo, you know. Again, to describe it, it would be more like a local breeders market. Right? From the vendor's booth, I'm sure we all take inspiration from what the US are doing, and I would say that the booths are very similar, but it's definitely not on the scale of the big ones. It's probably more like what you guys would have, like your little local reptile expos and stuff, right? They're not in like the major, you know, expo conference center type things and things like that. They're like hired basketball centers and gymnasium type things, you know, in the suburbs. But they're still good. They're great. And I'd say we've got a lot of variety, right? Like there's a couple, I love seeing this. There's a couple of people who rock up and they just vend turtles, right? And that's cool. You rock up and there's just all these native Australian turtles, which is awesome. Some people like, look, blue tongues are the ball pythons. That's what's happening. Whether people like to, I love all things reptiles, but blue tongues are huge now, right? Everybody on earth that loves reptiles knows the name Joe Ball. I don't know the guy personally, but like, who doesn't know the things that guy's done with blue tongues, right? And the things that he's producing is ridiculous, and they are clearly becoming like the ball python, right, of the lizard world, because so there's a crap load of blue tongues being vended at these things, and there's wild patterns and stuff, which is fantastic because they are just the best pet for a kid on the planet, right? They are just the most docile things you can get for a kid. Love blue tongues. Anyone listening thinking what's the best reptile for a kid? Blue tongue, hands down. Love them. And you got guys who focus on the carpet pythons, and they have 100 different morphs. You got guys who focus on the Enthresia, guys who do a bit of both, small monitors, a lot of variety. But we're definitely growing. The reptiles, the expo scene here is growing. They're gonna have like 10,000 people come through the door, which is awesome. So I think we're a few years off, but I think they're going to be some pretty kick-ass shows coming here. I've been kind of contemplating whether or not I'll do some vendoring and setting up a table, but I don't know if I want to sell anything at them. I don't know. Like, it's kind of a big question mark. I kind of want to just take some animals and show them off, right, a bit. Like, no one takes greens. Nobody takes greens really to expos, and I've been kind of contemplating maybe next year I'll take some and just set up a table and just have some green tree pythons on display, and try and get a bit more of an online following, because what I am finding here is that, like, to be honest, over the last, I can't remember for how long, but pretty much everything I sell is due to my social media pages.
Yeah.
I have not sold anything on online classifieds for years, despite posting ads. Just doesn't get me any sales.
Yeah.
Anything I sell is just via typically my Facebook page. All my followers on there, and it's not like I have the biggest following. It's just that's where I get the hits. So I'm finding that if you want to breed snakes and you want to move your animals, you need to have an online social media presence, which requires a whole nother level of effort, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just more work you got to put in. You want to move them, you got to do that.
Yeah. So, social media is work. It's a lot of work.
Mate, you want to be on top of the algorithms. You got to have 600 photos stored, because you got to be posting every day or every freaking 4 hours, really, right? To be constantly on top of it. But I can't get enough photos to be doing that. I just don't have time. And I had somebody make a comment not that long ago. I laughed because it's so true. And he's like, why would I want to just take photos of monochromatic snakes that all look the same? And I'm like, yeah, that's very true. And by that, he's like, all your greens look the same. Like it or not, that's so true.
Yeah.
Like, I might have a lot of cool looking snakes, but guess what? They all look the same.
Yeah.
So if you go onto my Instagram feed, it's like, wow, look at all those greens. It's like, yeah, but they're all the same. So it's like I could have hundreds of photos, but they all look the damn same. It's not like I'm doing thousands of different animals.
You got to put a picture of the female on eggs. That'll get you some likes.
I do. I've got all of those pictures. I've got pictures of them locked. I've got pictures of her ovulating. I've got pictures of her in her pre-lay. I've got pictures of her in the nest box before she laid, so loose. I've got pictures of her in a beehive. I'll be honest, I haven't seen the eggs.
Oh, wow.
She's just in her beehive, right? I've never I don't look at her much. I don't disturb her. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, you're saying relaxed. You're right. But the more I do and the more I interfere, it's not helping her do her job, right?
Yeah.
She knows what she's doing. All I can do is my best. I've got her temps dialed in as best I can. I've got the humidity as best I can. Leave her be. Try to check on her maybe every 4 or 5 days. I just lift the lid just an inch. Yep, she's cool. Put the lid back down. I don't disturb her. But every time I've checked, she's just in her little beehive. So whenever she's loosening and doing whatever she's doing, it's just not in that, 2 seconds every 4 days that I'm checking. I just haven't caught it. I think I saw a slither of white the other day, and then I'm like, when I put the lid down, I'm like, was that the egg, or was that just like part of her white dorsal stripe?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what I just saw, but
what did you so you've been to the US, right?
Yeah, a few times. I go for work maybe once, twice a year.
Do you ever mess around with the reptile hobby when you're here, just to check out some stuff that you can't interact with?
Once, and I'm going to do it more. I'm going to be honest, it's so stupid of me. So I work in the science industry and automation. So we got the company I distribute for has factories in Reno, Nevada. So I've been in Nevada a few times. Last year I was in, obviously then I didn't come during COVID. Last year I was in LA and then down into San Diego. I didn't even get a chance to go to San Diego Zoo, which is stupid. I will next year. I'm in San Diego, I think in February. So I'm gonna go to San Diego Zoo. And so I was in LA, San Diego Zoo. Then this year in February, I was in Boston. I was up in Boston, and I went up to NERD, so New England Reptile Distributors. Because you got to remember, right? When I do go for work, I kind of get 1 day, just not even. I get like half a day to do something, and it's pretty hard to find, private keepers with private collections that'll let some stranger in to poke around and have a look at things, right? Yeah. And I understand that. I totally get that. So you got to try to find a zoo or a commercial kind of enterprise that will let me have a look at things and whatnot. So I know someone who knows people at NERD, and they do their tours there. So I kind of had somebody prearrange a bit of a private tour, which was awesome because I love Amazon basins and I love Amazon boas and things like that. And, you know, the guys there laugh their heads off at me because, you know, they're trying to show me all this cool stuff and I loved it. And I'm like, can I see some corn snakes and can I see some ball pythons? And they're just looking at me and they're like, what do you want to see that crap for? Like, and I'm like, because I've never seen one. Like, I've never seen one in front of me. Like, I've just seen pictures of this shit, right? They're just laughing at me. And they're like, dude, you keep diamond pythons and all these things that they can only dream of. And they're like, you just want to see like a cheap, nasty, standard wild type ball python. I'm like, hell yes, I do. That's exactly what I want to see right now.
A $40 normal ball python.
100%. Show me that. And they're just laughing, right? So that was an absolute awesome experience for me because, you know, I got the whole, you know, Amazon boas and, you know, emerald tree boas and Amazon basins and anacondas and what else? Is it the pine snake or whatever? The black pine snake?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. Freaking awesome thing. Gila monsters, that was cool.
That's awesome.
You know, milk snakes and bolins. Oh my god, bolini, like they're awesome. Like I love black snakes, right? So just to see that stuff and some of the colubrids and things as well that they've got there, and yeah, it was just cool because, you know, to see things like, yeah, you guys obviously see a lot and you guys can keep shit from all over the world, but we can't. As I said, we're restricted to what we see here, and to see those species, you got to go to a zoo, right? And it's funny, you go to the zoos in Australia, and to be honest, their reptile sections are pretty lousy for the most part. Like my 5-year-old is obsessed with chameleons, right? And he loves animals. He's obsessed with chameleons. And I've probably taken him to at least 6 or 7 different zoos in multiple states of Australia, and I cannot find a damn chameleon to show him in real life. Just pictures. Cannot find a chameleon, right? So the fact that when I was even there, I got to see like a Jackson and a veiled and a panther or whatever. I don't think it was a panther, but I got like pictures of me holding these things to show him. Like, oh my god, he was so happy.
That's awesome.
Right? We got the rattlesnake. Oh, we got the king cobras out and all sorts of things while I was there as well.
Awesome.
So, it was cool. It was cool. So when I'm there in next I don't know. I got to think about it. But yeah, I'll be in San Diego, I think, next Feb or something. So I'll probably do the zoo and try and find something to do around there that's reptile related.
You got to come on out to Florida at some point. We'll go look for Burmese pythons.
Yeah, that'd be mad. And canyons and crocs and stuff too.
Oh yeah.
So often, I think it alternates. When I come, it's usually San Diego, Boston, San Diego. This is a conference that I attend every year. But so they're the two that it alternates between. But I often fly through to get to Boston. I fly through Dallas. So again, probably not next year, but the year after, if I have to go back to Boston, I'll probably try to spend a day or so in Dallas and see what there is around there. Yeah, try and stick my nose into the reptile scene there if there's much to see. So again, like for me, it's about maximizing the return on what's typically just a few hours, you know, like just stick my nose in and see what's there to be seen. I do. So also this year I had to go to Japan. I couldn't find anything there. I tried.
Oh, really?
I really tried, but I put some posts on some of the forums on like Facebook pages and that saying, come to Japan. If there's anyone that can tell me if there's anything to be seen, please let me know. Nothing. Couldn't find anything in Tokyo, so I just kind of let it go and did the tourist thing for a few hours.
That sucks. Yeah, I'm and here I am. I'm dying to go to Australia one day. I want to go there and see some carpet pythons in the wild and some Antaresia, and that would be incredible.
I'd love to do that too. It's just one of those things, right? You live there and you just don't get out. I've seen diamonds. I've seen diamonds in the wild. Not as many as I'd like. I was actually thinking I wouldn't mind going and having a look, you know, in the next couple of months. There's a few places around that are probably a bit more easy to find them. Probably just got to make some phone calls to some guys who definitely know where to find them. But yeah, so diamonds I've seen a couple of times. I used to do a lot of forward driving and camping, and diamonds you'll find crossing a lot of those fire trails and stuff during the day. You know, you find them out basking on the fire trails, getting a bit of sun, and then they're able to duck off back into the long grass and the bush again. But unfortunately, you'll see them hit by a car more than not as well. So I've probably seen more flattened than I've seen alive, unfortunately.
That's too bad.
But, actually, my mum called me a couple of months ago. She was, it's probably earlier this year. She was up near Richmond, up near Colway River, and she freaked out. She's calling. She's like, Jason, I came back to my car and I hopped in and there's this green snake just went flying under my car. And she was freaking out, totally panicked. I'm like, where are you? And she told me. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's a diamond python. She's like, how do you know? And I'm like, well, there's nothing else there. I said, okay. I said, it's either, and I asked her, like, how big was it? Because it could have been a green tree snake, right? Which are like, they're about this round and about 5 foot long, skinny little long things. And I'm like, I highly doubt it was that. And she kind of described it to me. And I'm like, okay, it's clearly a diamond python. And then I'm like, it's fine. And she's like, but what if it's up under the car? And I'm like, what if? Like, I said, you got two options. You can get out and have a look, crawl under the car and have a look if you want. She's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, well, then drive home. I'm like, what do you want to do? You can sit there all night if you want, but it's not going to change anything. I said, chances are it went under one side and straight out the other and back into the bush. It didn't bloody fly under your car and just suddenly stop and go, oh shit, this looks like a nice place to make home for the night. Right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it'd be cool to see a lot more of them. But you kind of got to get out, right, to see it all. But some of the places are a bit remote to get to, and you got to put a bit of effort in. And you know what it's like with kids, right? It's a bit hard to do those things.
I know. I haven't seen a Burmese python yet, and I'm here in Florida. I haven't seen a rattlesnake alive yet. Like you said, you see them squashed on the road, but I haven't seen them live. And I'm supposed to go out to the Everglades here soon with a friend of mine to look at the berms and see what we can find. Go out herping all night for a couple nights in a row. And when I told my son that, and I said, but you won't be able to go, bud, because it's going to be all night and all that, and he just lost it and started crying. So then the guilt kicks in, and I'm like, well, I guess I can't do that until I can take him.
Yeah. Mine would be, my 5-year-old would be exactly the same. The same. I take him, we go looking for water dragons and stuff come summer. Just along the local creeks and waterways, you can find a lot of big water dragons, eastern water dragons. They're an awesome lizard. They're very underrated in the hobby here. The big Australian eastern water dragons, very cool, very dinosaur looking, but a bit big to keep inside.
Yeah.
Also a bit of a pain in the butt to feed because they are largely an insect eater. So, when you've got a large dragon, this big, like they're going to eat you out of house and home in terms of bugs. Yeah. Right. They're going to eat a little bit of veggie matter and stuff as they get older, but not as much as you'd hope. So,
they got to be so cool to see out in the wild.
Oh, awesome. Like you can go to picnic areas here and they'll just be like literally just running around your feet.
Wow.
So even lace monitors, like I remember as a kid, we hired a boat once up on the river, pulled into a beach, and we picnic. I was very young with my mum, my dad, my sister, and I, and literally just sitting on this little remote beach on the Hawkesbury River. So it's just bush everywhere, and picnic rug out, sitting there having a picnic. Mum and dad had a glass of drink, and there was a bag of cheesels, so a bag of chips. Bloody lace monitor, probably about 5 foot long at least, walks down, and they just got that kind of Miranda, like that stroll, just like nothing phases them. These things will just tear your throat out if you cross them type thing. They've just got a confidence and a presence about them that is just, I love. It just literally walked up while we're sitting there, it half on the mat, like literally practically had its head on our laps, stuck its head into the bag of cheesels, lifted its head up, and then just walked away with our bag of chips. So what the heck just happened, right? And then it just shook the bag of chips off and walked back into the bush. It was it's this crazy experience. Wow. Like they're just so confident. They don't care at all what you're doing.
That's so cool.
I've seen a few red bellies. Like you'll see more red bellies because they get a little bit close to the urban areas and stuff than the diamonds. But red bellies and browns are a little bit more common, I think, to come across. But I've got no issues with them. I don't particularly want to come across them.
Yeah.
I'd rather come across a diamond.
Oh, hell yeah. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, dude. It's been a long time coming. I think we've been talking for quite a while, huh?
Yeah. Do you want to touch on the diamonds quickly?
Oh,
The
yeah,
intergrades?
the intergrades, yeah.
Yeah, not much to say. I guess just to follow on what Nick was saying, right? It's just nice to hear. As I said to you privately, right? Because I think there's just been a misunderstanding. Like I used to hear it a lot in the US forums and chats and things like that. That 100% what he was saying correct. You can't take a coastal carpet python and a diamond python and breed them together and go, I made intergrades. No, you made a hybrid.
Mhm.
That is a hybrid. That is a mongrel, right? That is your Morelia milkshake that I'm talking about. That is not a diamond python, and it is not a coastal carpet python, and it is no longer an intergrade either. It is a diamond python cross coastal carpet python, and that is what it should be sold as, a diamond cross coastal. It
Yeah.
should. The word intergrade doesn't even come into the equation there. I can't speak to the phylogenetics or anything like that he probably could. He knows a heck of a lot more of that, obviously. But they are not one and the same thing. They are three distinctly separate things. And yes, there's probably some genetic gradient there of some type, but you have a diamond python, you do have a southern coastal carpet python, and then in the middle you have a species all of its own, or a subspecies all on its own, in my opinion, but I don't know how it can be defined. But it is a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it is in its own distinct thing. And I do think that in the early days, maybe here, and definitely I think I saw it in the early days in the US, like I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago on the forums and stuff, I used to see a lot of it where people would be like, intergrades for sale. And you'd see a picture of the parents and like, that's a coastal, that's a diamond, that's not an intergrade.
Yeah.
That is just a hybrid. That is not an intergrade. They are their own distinct things. And I know for a while here, in fact, if you look up on the old Aussie Pythons and Snakes Reptile forum, which is the Australian forums, still exists. Not as popular, obviously, thanks to Facebook. But the old forums here, there's a guy called Kel Woolley, quite known for his line. And they used to call them couple of names, but Port Macquarie carpets, because Port Macquarie is where that intergrade zone kind of kicks off. Mm-hmm. Or some used to call them, I guess there's a bit of, I didn't even know the difference. Some used to call them Northern Rainforest diamonds, but there was an effort by some to make sure that there was a clear distinction that these are not diamond carpet pythons and these are not coastal carpet pythons. They are their own thing. And for people to say, it is 75% diamond and 25% coastal, therefore it's an intergrade. No, it's not an intergrade. It's not. It's a crossbreed. And that's, I'm not having a dig at that. It's not my thing, but it's very important that people do their best. And I say best because the water's getting muddied every day, every season, but do their best to just label things as they are to the best of their knowledge. Right. And I also think that some people just drop the word natural, right? So it's a natural intergrade versus it's just an intergrade, right? Therefore, they could say a diamond cross a coastal is an intergrade. It's not a natural one because it didn't occur naturally, right? It's just intergrade. It's like, no, it's still just a hybrid, right? But
so you guys have intergrades in the hobby?
They're here for sure. They're not as prominent as they once were. Like I said, right, if you go back 10, probably even 10 years, 15 years, man, there was like 10 different localities of diamonds and everything, right? There's Illawarra diamonds, there's Nabiac diamonds, there's Gosford diamonds, Newcastle diamonds, North Sydney diamonds, Colo River diamonds, Lithgow diamonds. There's freaking tons of them. Right. And that's because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, just probably even just prior to licensing, and even perhaps after licensing, someone once upon a time went out, caught a couple of diamonds from a very particular location, kept them, bred them, sold them as a locality specific diamond. Is what it is. That's our locality. And that's how you get distinct lines. And there are some subtle but phenotypic differences between, you know, a diamond from the Illawarra versus the diamond from the Gosfords, right? And even when you go even a little bit further north, that you get slight differences in their patterns. And I'm no expert on these, but it's no different than coastals, right? You get some slight differences. It's there's no general rule to this, because I've said it earlier, right? I've seen diamonds from the Colo River, which is like Western Sydney area, that are striped, and it's like, whoa, striped diamonds, right? Legitimate striped diamonds. But then you see guys, I've seen guys who have bred jungle jags to diamonds, and some of the siblings, which are just complete, you know, mixed things, look like a striped diamond, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what they are. So it's clear to say that there are guys who put a lot of work into getting very refined lines that they put a lot of work into. But there are distinct different localities of these things across their range. But it's just got to be said that, you know, you can't just take one of these and one of them, put them together and think you've made an integrate. It doesn't exist. But in today's hobby in Australia, because of the advent of the morphs, and because that's obviously the current big thing, and it'll probably stay that way, right? Like we see it in dogs, we see it in birds, we see it in fish. It's just the way the animal trade goes. These are not animals to be released back into the wild, so it just makes sense to try to make the coolest looking thing to keep as a pet. It's what's desirable, makes sense. So we've seen obviously a massive shift towards making those designer animals, which means we've just seen kind of a decrease in the demand to produce more of those locality animals. So there's definitely fewer people producing, you know, locality specific anything.
Yeah.
Anything. I can't find very few locality specific things anymore at all. I only know of one person producing natural integrates, you know, and literally only one. But before, like for a while, they were quite popular because, man, the yellow on those things pops.
Yeah.
If you can get a really nice, you know, pair of natural integrates, some of those things are outrageously attractive snakes. But I don't know of many people doing it. My diamonds, I was extremely particular with my diamonds when I sourced them, because I know that, I'm sure you're familiar with the Gamma line of diamonds in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Gamma line's lost its lineage, if that makes sense. It looks like anyone just now puts a jungle jag with a diamond, and if it looks good, they just call it a Gamma. But you know, everyone, like, that's a bloody nice looking line of snakes. Like, I remember seeing that years ago going, oh my God, I want some of those. And that is something people here chase as well. But again, for every diamond jungle jag you produce 50% of the clutch are non-jags, right? So you get a 50% of your clutch are just a mixture of 50% jungle, you know, diamonds, or maybe they're 25% jungle, 75% diamonds, or 88% diamonds, who knows? Point is that you're getting more and more and more non-pure siblings of all different mixes out there, and some of those high percentage ones look just like pure diamonds.
Yeah.
All right. And as a purist, I'm like, oh, I don't want to touch those. Ideally, I don't want to go down that path. I want to stick with what I know is pure. So I can trace. In fact, I'm just trying to think here. Everything I've got here, I can trace back to the 90s.
Wow.
Everything. Most things, in fact, I can trace back to the bush. The spotteds, the roughies, all of my greens. Actually, pretty much everything except some of the spotteds. Like the spotteds, I can trace back. You know, I've got like the albinos and things like that. I can trace back good 15 years and stuff. But there's so many spotteds in captivity now that God knows. But most of things like my Cooktown Max, the greens, the roughies, the diamonds, everything I can trace back pretty much to the bush. and through most breeders. And I've got lineage charts, not of like the parents, but of all of the different breeders,
Yeah.
just so I can make sure I can trace it back for that purity's sake. Because, you know, I do think we're, you know, as I said, we're muddying the waters where you start to look at things. I'm like, I don't know if that's pure anymore. But I think it's a shame. But I understand and respect that that's just where these things go. We see it in the dog market. We see it in, as I said, every industry.
Yeah.
But the diamonds, I think, the diamonds and jungles seem to cop the brunt of it because they're such bloody good looking snakes.
Yeah.
And because of those yellows. And when you tie those yellows in with things like sun glows and super zebs and granites and all those other cool things, and you start to get those bright colors coming through, of course you want to bring them in there, right? But it just means so many sibs start to just muddy the waters. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it is what it is. It's just where it's all heading, I suppose. So if you want pure stuff, my argument is always just get them and sit on them, because
Yeah.
you just don't know what you're going to end up with. So I hope the guys working with all those pure stuff, like the diamonds, are pretty secure here, man. There's a lot of guys working with diamonds. There really is, which is awesome. And a lot of guys are passionate about keeping them outside, which is a big thing as well with diamonds.
That's awesome. I can't wait to do that myself.
Do it, dude. You're going to love it.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Nah, thanks for having me, mate. It's awesome. Good to be here. Thanks for chatting.
Hell yeah.